well, we come on to the next period of questions, which are questions for the Chief Minister. And I see people have already noted, and I think Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. Can I ask the Chief Minister, having had the report from the Housing Policy Development Board in his possession for 8 months now, can he confirm whether he accepts or rejects its recommendations?
Chief Minister.
Sir, we've considered a number of the recommendations, sir. Some are being accepted and some are not being accepted, sir, and some require further work. I think that's been laid out in the, and partially referred to in the action plan that Deputy Labby has issued more recently, sir.
Supplementary, sir, that is most certainly not the case. The housing talking plan, for that's what it is, not an action plan, does not say in it in any clear terms which recommendations are accepted or rejected. The Chief Minister has just said that some are rejected, so perhaps he can list which ones for us.
Chief Minister, can you offer more detail?
So I don't have the full list of the Housing Policy Development Board recommendations with me, sir. I would also challenge the Senator's obviously political view of the Creating Better Homes and Action Plan for Housing in Jersey title, sir. And I think we should be commending the Housing Minister, sir, on the piece of.
Well, Deputy Truscott.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there were concerns that COVID vaccine supplies to the island might run short. Could the Chief Minister advise if any such shortage ever materialised? And is he confident that all forward orders will be met in full? Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. Well, firstly, sir, I hope the Deputy enjoys me in absolutely commending the fantastic programme we've had. We, as islanders and government and as politicians, should be really proud of the success we've had. And so essentially, I'm not aware of any issues in terms of the supply to date. As we've said all the way through, it is constrained, but we receive a proportion of what the UK receives. And obviously that supply fluctuates week by week, but that's part of the planning process. In terms of looking ahead, so again, I'm unaware of any delays outside of those sort of changes in the delivery of vaccines to the UK or production of vaccines within the UK, and then the onward supply to us.
Supplemental, please, sir. Yes, and I do totally concur with the Chief Minister. I think the service at Fort Region has been exemplary. So can the Chief Minister confirm that we are on course to have the majority of islanders fully vaccinated by the middle of August as planned? Thank you, sir.
Certainly, sir. To the best of my knowledge, we remain on track. In fact, so there was a press release, I think it was last week or the week before, which confirmed that. So to date, sir, we remain on track, as far as I'm aware, for the middle of August, sir, for all adult islanders to be vaccinated, sir. And as again, sir, I think we should absolutely commend the team, or everybody across the island who's helped us challenge and tackle the pandemic to date, but particularly in the vaccination programme. We should be very pleased with where we are, sir.
Well, Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I would like to ask the Chief Minister about the wording that he chose when he made an announcement on the 25th of March to the media that the former Education Minister, in his words, he said that he spoke of him being not currently capable of fulfilling his ministerial duties and of having an incapacity to fulfill his role. Does the Chief Minister accept that at best the choice of wording here is misleading and at worst it is untrue, because the then Minister wasn't at all incapacitated? It's simply that the Chief Minister had removed his functions for whatever reason from him.
Chief Minister.
Yes, sir. I think we're probably entering into what I'll call legal territory as far as I'm aware. So well, certainly from my perspective, sir, the term incapacitated is the term that's referred to, I think, under the States of Jersey law. I think it's the law on the standing order, sir, and it's used in that wider context, sir, and has been implied in a variety of circumstances during the lives of both this assembly and previous assemblies, sir.
Supplemental, Deputy?
So I don't ever recall it being used in these kind of circumstances. I recall it maybe being used and would expect it to be used where somebody is ill, hospitalised, and is not capable of fulfilling their role. But can he confirm that actually, in this case, Deputy Masson was capable of fulfilling that role physically, and that it was a political decision on behalf of the Chief Minister to remove the duties from him? Can the Minister just confirm the facts around that?
So I'm somewhat hesitant to get drawn into a discussion of what, as I understand, is an ongoing matter, but I made the statement at the time. It's an expression that was used in relation to the into the terminology that's used within either the, I think it's the law, sir. I don't think it's standing orders, but also it's in reference to an incapacity to be able to fulfil ministerial duties, sir. And I think that's quite a wide definition, sir.
Well, Senator Valois.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister confirm who is responsible and therefore accountable for the Public Employees Pension Scheme?
Chief Minister.
Sir, I can't recall the exact title, sir, but there is in essence a committee of management which is responsible certainly for the management of the fund, sir.
Supplemental, Senator?
Yes, sir. Can I ask the Chief Minister to please expand in terms of, there is a committee of management, but therefore who is politically accountable for ensuring that that fund is managed through the policies that come under the regulations, the 3 different regulations that are required?
Sir, I always hesitate to go into facts with the senator, because I know she has an incredibly very good memory, sir. So if she's read it somewhere, she will probably know it far more than me. So I would wish to just go back to and refer and come back to the senator. My suggestion, sir, and I would wish to verify that, is that I would have thought as a fund it would come under either Treasury or Social Security, and I would think it was from Treasury, sir, but I will go back and verify that.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister give some details around the 14th of June date and what impact it will have on schools, please? So will all current restrictions and mitigations that are in place in schools be lifted, including bubbles, mask wearing, children being able to play with different year groups in the playground, and I think staggered start and finish times?
So I can't give that detail at this stage. We are holding another ministerial meeting, a competent authorities meeting this evening, so just to do an update as to exactly where we are, and so I can't give the full details as to what is happening within the education sphere or the school sphere until after that meeting, sir. Thank you.
Supplementary, please, sir.
Yes.
Can the Chief Minister confirm that the questions I have asked will be considered at the meeting that he has mentioned?
So I think the wider context is we always evaluate matters, so I would expect that to be considered, so as I said, I will revert to members.
Well, Deputy Ward.
Thanks, sir. May I ask Chief Minister, following the Climate Change Citizens Assembly report, does the Chief Minister support the findings and recommendations of that report? Are there any in particular that he would strongly support to get on with as soon as possible? Thank you, sir.
So obviously members had an update in reasonably recent past, as did council ministers. I think we're still digesting the full implications of those recommendations, sir. I do have to say, sir, that from a personal perspective, I do support mechanisms that would encourage a switch from car usage, particularly I will say commuter car usage, to more sustainable forms of transport. That is a personal view, sir, and I have referred to that previously, sir.
Supplementary, sir.
Yes, Deputy.
So will the Chief Minister be encouraging his Council of Ministers and the Assistant Ministers to be supporting the findings of the report so that they can be implemented as quickly as possible?
Sir, be very clear, the intention is that the recommendations will be, as the ministers have had an initial briefing and with a further discussion to follow, I believe, sir. At that point, we'll then get down to the details of the recommendations. I believe, sir, in addition, there is an intention for a further debate to be happening, sir, on the matter.
Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. Can the Chief Minister inform us on what day the Indian variant, now called Delta, was picked up on, and from which zone those who tested positive for it came from? Thank you, sir.
So I don't have that level of detail with me, sir. I would have to just go back and refer to the and get that detailed information, and then I can very happily circulate that to members later on this afternoon, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, please, sir. Can the Chief Minister inform us how does or will the travel policy reflect the changes with the Indian, now Delta variant in the UK and now in Jersey, and also given the recent statistics of the number of positive cases increasing, including one from the community? Thank you, sir.
So just to address the latter point first, I think we've got to be very careful and keep things in proportion. Obviously, the numbers that were reported over the weekend was a result of 7,000 tests. So again, the number of positive cases that came out of that were very, very, very low. And it therefore goes back to that point all the way through about maintaining a balance of risk. It's about suppressing the virus and making sure that services do not get overwhelmed in conjunction with what has been an exceptionally successful vaccination programme. But so we are monitoring the position. As we know, that's why we have got the emergency brake in place. But equally, sir, we have to make sure that, and I think we are getting closer to that point of making sure of almost moving to living with COVID in the context of low numbers and in the context particularly of the vaccination programme and where it is. And as we've said, the wider impacts of well-being as well as economic well-being as well, sir. So within all those contexts, we continue to evaluate. I've said we've got a competent authorities meeting later this evening, and if there's anything that comes out of that, so we'll make sure members obviously briefed as swiftly as we possibly can, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I fear there may have been some selective quoting of law previously. Given that Article 28(2) of the States of Jersey law says that the Chief Minister may, during the temporary absence or incapacity of a minister, personally discharge the functions of that minister, would the Chief Minister agree that rather than incapacity being the reason for being able to take over those functions, it was actually the temporary absence of the former Education Minister that allowed him to take over those functions?
Are you able to offer an answer to that, Chief Minister?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I was actually trying to rapidly reach for the relevant part of the law, sir. But to be honest, I don't think I can add very much more, sir, other than to say, so certainly the advice we took at the time was that the position of the then minister was that he was incapacitated. Was incapacitated from the point of view of not being able to, at that point, temporarily fulfil his duties as a minister, and that's why the declaration as such was relevant. I'm very happy to have that discussion with the deputy separately, sir.
Supplemental question? Maybe room for one further question, Senator Meze.
Thank you, sir. Could the Chief Minister confirm whether it is his view that reports which are due to be laid before the States Assembly ought to be shown to States members before they are briefed to the media?
Sir, ordinarily that should be the case. I'm not too sure of what the Senator is referring to, if you could elucidate.
Well, whilst I'm glad he asked me to do that, I was in fact referring to the housing talking plan. I had asked questions on this behind the scenes and been ignored.
Well, I'm afraid that brings time available for questions to the Chief Minister to an end. The next item on the order paper is under K, a statement from the Ministry of Treasury and Resources regarding a response to the Complaints Board report. I'm not sure if this has been circulated to members yet, Minister, has it? Minister, has it been circulated to members yet? So it's going to be posted in the chat pretty well immediately. There we are. Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. Following the publication of the Complaints Board's findings relating to a complaint made by Mr. Newman against the Treasury, I am making this statement to the Assembly. The Complaints Board have given considerable time and effort in hearing Mr. Newman's complaint regarding the calculation of pension entitlements from the Public Employees Pension Fund, PEPF, and I thank them for considering the complaint. As administrator for the Public Employees Pension Fund, the Treasury and Exchequer Department is required to administer the scheme in accordance with the scheme regulations on behalf of the PEPF Committee of Management as the governing body for the scheme. The Committee of Management is made up of 6 employer and 6 member representatives and an independent chair. There is a stage 4 complaints process through which any complaints are processed. Stage 1 is an internal review by the Public Employees Pension Team. Stage 2 is considered by the Head of Service. Stage 3 is considered by the Scheme Secretary. And the final stage 4 goes to the Committee of Management. At the Complaints Board hearing, it was highlighted that the complaint had already been through this 4-stage PEPF complaints process. The complaint was considered and not upheld by Treasury and Exchequer at stages 1 and 2, before being passed to the Secretary for the Committee of Management. The Treasury and Exchequer Department provided all available evidence requested by the Committee of Management to consider the stage 4 complaint. In August 2018, the chair of the Committee of Management set up a working group to investigate a small number of transfer out complaints and make recommendations to the full committee. The working group, which comprised both an employer and member representatives, reported its findings to the Committee of Management meeting on the 27th of September 2018, where employer and member representatives were in attendance. The committee agreed the recommendation of the working group that quotes would be provided on the old terms for any member who had made contact with the PEPF before the 1st of May 2018. The Treasury and Exchequer Department provided all available evidence requested by the Committee of Management to consider this particular complaint, and at the final stage, the complaint was not upheld by the committee. The committee were provided with phone records, copies of emails, and other correspondence. The committee were provided with all correspondence received before and after the outcome of the stage 4 complaint. It was notified to the complainant. Following publication, the Complaints Board report by the Privilege and Procedures Committee in December 2020, the report was passed to the chair of the PEPF Committee of Management for consideration. A further working group was set up to review findings. The group, comprising of employer and member representatives, concluded that no new or material evidence was brought to the committee as part of the report. The Committee of Management met on the 18th of February 2021 and agreed that the committee's decision in respect of the Stage 4 complaint is unchanged, primarily because there is no new or material evidence which would cause the committee to alter its original decision. The committee has a duty to ensure the scheme is administered fairly and consistently for all of its membership, and its duties are owed to the membership. The committee, comprising of employer and member representatives, have determined it would be unfair to the membership as a whole to pay additional benefits in respect to the complainant in circumstances where there is no evidence other than verbal assurances that a request was made on his behalf in the relevant timeframe. As administrator for the Public Employees Pension Fund, Treasury and Exchequer are required to administer scheme benefits in accordance with the scheme regulations on behalf of the committee. Whilst I appreciate the time and effort that has been spent in hearing the complaint, the committee, and therefore Treasury and Exchequer as administrator, are unable to make a higher payment. However, I have noted concerns raised by the Complaints Board regarding the independent oversight of the appeal process. I have therefore asked for the PEPF complaints procedure to be reviewed to ensure that it is consistent with modern best practice for pension complaints. Treasury and Exchequer are liaising with the Financial Services and the PEPF Committee of Management about future proposals for the creation of an independent final stage to the member appeal process through the Channel Islands Financial Ombudsman, who is independent of government. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Minister. There's a question period, 15 minutes available for questions to this Minister on this matter. Does anyone have any questions? Senator Barber.
Yes, thank you, sir. Can I ask the Minister, who advised the Committee of Management that the board did not have jurisdiction over this complaint?
Sorry, so I didn't quite understand the question. I went through the process of stages 1 to 4. I'm not quite sure what the Senator is asking.
Well, it was, as I just heard the question, did anyone, and if so, who advised the board they had no jurisdiction to hear the complaint? Was that a misunderstanding of what you said, Minister?
I'm sorry, I don't understand who advised the board.
Are you able
the Committee of Management?
Senator Barber, are you able to expand on your question a little bit to make it more?
Yes, yes, sir. Sorry. For the benefit of the Minister, there was a letter sent to the Treasurer on the 19th of February this year from the Committee of Management that stated the committee is advised that the board does not have jurisdiction over decisions made by the committee. I'm asking the Minister who advised the committee that that was the case.
I can't answer the question, so I don't know who advised the committee if that was the case. I'm not quite sure. From what I've described, it's a Committee of Management that oversees all this, with the independent Financial Ombudsman as the independent representative. I can list the members of the Committee of Management if that's any help.
Now, do you have a supplemental question, Senator Barber?
Yes. Well, can I ask a different question then, sir? If that's the case that the Minister's not able to answer.
Well, I think what you can do is come back with a second question. But I must move on to the next questioner at this stage.
Okay.
Deputy Sir Martin.
Thank you, sir. The Minister said that she is asking PEPF complaints procedure to be reviewed. Is she aware of any other complaints of this type of nature?
Yes, sir. There are very few complaints, and I think it was the change of the timing of transferring out of one pension fund, the one that we're talking about, into another pension fund, and that changed was going to change in March, so April the end of April was the last date to be able to transfer out on those current terms before the terms changed in May. And therein lies the problem, in as much as the transfer out notification was not made until May.
Supplementary, yes.
Thank you. So can I just ask the Minister, sir, if those other cases are also of a nature where a verbal assurance has been given but can't be verified?
No, the verbal assurances cannot be verified. Obviously, each case is very different. This one is being taken to the highest stage of the complaints board, to stage 4, in as much as obviously I've got to be very careful because it's a personal situation, that the money paid out, bearing in mind the option to transfer out is voluntary. Nobody has to do it. It's a voluntary transfer. And the person in question received less money on the basis of the May audit and pension contribution than he would have done had it been effected in April. But there was no evidence whatsoever that anybody could find that the request had been made in April.
Well, Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister consider that it is an opportune moment to review the Public Finances Manual, particularly in relation to special payments, given the comments of the Treasurer of the States to the Public Accounts Committee yesterday, when it was identified that he did not agree to the special payment that was made to the former Chief Executive?
I think we're going slightly off course, but yes, as I said at the end of my opening remarks, that we are going to review the independence of this, and that will be happening. But in this particular case, it was the complete lack of any form of evidence which has caused the problem with the pension paid out.
So my question relates to the report of the complaints panel, which identifies that the Treasurer of the States is not satisfied there's a proper legal basis to make such a payment in these circumstances. And that is why I was asking the question in relation to the Public Finances Manual, which is a living document that the Minister has the liberty to update if she feels there is a need to do so. And so I'd like her to respond to that part of the question.
Yes, it will. The Public Finances Manual is constantly being updated. And of course, this, as I said before, was going to be reviewed as to all aspects of it brought forward by this case. And the Public Finances Manual will be adapted accordingly if there's found something to be missing.
Point of order is raised by Deputy Young. Yes,
sir. Sorry to raise this, but this matter has caught me by surprise. Obviously, issues to do with pensions. We have both the Treasury Minister making a statement now and answering questions, and also SEB. My question is whether or not the entitlement to raise questions on these individual pension cases should go under the rules to the Treasury or SEB. And I ask that because I know there are outstanding historic complaints with pension matters which are within SEB's brief. Could I please have some guidance on that? It stops me out. The problem is that I can't ask questions of ministers, but I can ask a question of SEB, you see, sir.
Although I think I understand your question, Deputy, the fact is that the Minister for Treasury and Resources is entitled to make this statement. She's made it and she's entitled, therefore, to be questioned on it. And I don't think I can take the point any further than that. I think that's the most that I can say and most assistance I can give in the context of this particular question and answer session. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
Second question, Senator Valois.
Yes, thank you, sir. In the statement, the Minister mentions the duty of the Committee of Management to all members. Can I ask then the Minister what duty the Committee of Management have to notify employees that there is a suspension of evaluation going on?
Well, under the legislation referred to, the PEPF Committee of Management is the governing body for the PEPF. the committee is, as I said before, made up of 6 employee and 6 member representatives with an independent chair, and the committee has a fiduciary responsibility for the management of the fund.
I'm trying to do some scanning.
I'm sorry, somebody appears to be having their microphone on and talking over the state's debate. Members who are functioning remotely, please check. Please do carry on, Minister.
Just to clarify, under the pensions law, which I think was a question somebody asked, it's the Chief Minister who appoints the Committee of Management, but their actions and decisions are taken of their own accord with the 6 members representatives and 6 employee representatives.
Supplemental question, Senator?
Yes, thank you, sir. On the basis that I understand it's a governing body and I understand how many members there are of the Committee of Management, what challenge does the Treasury Minister provide when agreeing the funding strategy statement that's required to overarch the valuations process of the Committee of Management?
The Treasury Minister, as Minister for Treasury and Exchequer, is ultimately responsible, but Treasury and Exchequer administer the pensions scheme.
Well, if no one else has any questions for this Minister, then I draw this question period to a close. And we now move on with the order paper to public business. I'd remind members at this stage that we are, of course, applying the agreed timing for speeches. And so the greffier will ring a bell when the time's up, and there will be on your screen a clock running to show the elapsed time. The first item is the Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Request for New Regulations, P20, lodged by Deputy Ward. The main respondent will be the Minister for the Environment, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
States has to decide whether of opinion to request the Minister for Environment to lodge the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings Licence and Jersey Regulations 2000, taking into account the following amendments from the draft lodged as P106 2019. 1. Inclusion of a longer time frame for expiration of rental licence through the inclusion of the word 5th in Regulation 3.2 to read, a licence commences on 1st January following the date on which it is granted unless the Minister specifies another date of commencement in the licence and expires on the 5th anniversary of the date of commencement. 2. The replacement of the words inspect the dwelling within Regulation 3.3a with the words require that the dwelling is inspected in order to read, before issuing a new licence, the Minister must require that the dwelling be inspected. 3. The replacement of the words, and if such charges are imposed, they must be published within Regulation 3.5 with the words, provided that the charges are first agreed by the Assembly in order to read, the Minister may impose charges for the issue of a licence provided that the charges are first agreed by the State's Assembly. 4. The replacement of the transitional provisions, date of 31st March 2020 within Regulation 6.1 with the date 30th of June 2022. 5. The amendment of the date within Regulation 7, detail on when the regulations will come into force from 1st December 2019 to 1st of March 2022.
Deputy.
Sir, if I may, before we start this debate, if I may,
yes.
Could I ask whether you think that it's appropriate that all landlords in this debate make a declaration to that end, that they are landlords?
Well, it seems so. No, I don't think it's necessary in this particular case, Deputy. There's no direct pecuniary advantage as a result of this proposition. It's a request for the Minister to go away and bring back something else. It's procedural to that extent. Obviously, if something else comes back which could have a direct pecuniary effect on somebody, then that will be a different matter and particular things will need to be declared at that point, in my judgment. Thank you. Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I shall just stop my little choking fits and see if I can actually speak without coughing. Thank you, sir. Please forgive me if I do start in the middle. So I'd like to open the debate with a context to bring in this proposition at this time rather than 3 sittings ago. and with a summary of the information around what this proposition addresses to frame the debate around the actualities of a licensing scheme. I am now at a point where I bring the proposition as time is running out to bring action before the next election and within the time frame of this proposition. In addition, I am afraid I cannot trust the Minister's regulations to be brought forward. I lodged this proposition for initial debate on the 20th of April this year. I was very careful to consult with the Minister for this action. I postponed the debate following assurances that the Minister would bring the regulations detailed in my proposition himself. I waited, I trusted, and postponed twice. I was pleased to see the regulations lodged with plenty of time for the Council of Ministers and scrutiny to respond. But instead, sir, despite several attempts to contact the Minister, it was just last Wednesday, 3 working days before the sitting, that I had an appointment made to meet with the Minister, Assistant Minister, and several officers. It became clear that the Minister would not bring the regulations to the Assembly today. So why is it important to debate this proposition today? To put simply, we urgently need a system to license landlords for many reasons that I will mention shortly. This is about the introduction of a licensing scheme. It is not a register. A licensing scheme is a much more structured and expectant process. Registration is someone putting themselves on a list. They are telling the government they are doing something. It doesn't require any inspection before it happens. Seldom is anyone prosecuted for not registering, as it is usually deemed not in the public interest, and it is difficult to find someone who just doesn't bother. It's hardly even reactive. Licensing is government giving permission for something to happen. It can be a prosecutable offence not to be licensed, e.g. driving a car, and minimum standards must be imposed before a licence is granted, e.g. competent to drive demonstrated through driving test. We license fishermen to regulate our fishing in our waters, or we attempt to do so. We need to regulate our waters to ensure conservation of our stocks, was what the Assistant Minister said. We want to protect the habitat, if you like, the homes of the marine species. In this way, trusted fishermen are supported, others are excluded. So we license the sale of ice creams from mobile premises. That way, our environmental health team know who is selling what and from where. They can plan and carry out the necessary checks to ensure the ice cream is safe to eat. We do not just wait for someone to be made ill. We act proactively. Prevention is always better than cure. We license people to drive vehicles and we hold them to minimum standards. Should we just put them on a register and trust that they can drive? No, of course not. We need to protect others. We license the sale of alcohol for public order and public health reasons. We license the finance industry. Despite this, it thrives. Indeed, one might argue that regulation is one of its strong points. And yet, when it comes to people's homes, the place where they should feel safe, the place where they should feel secure, we do nothing. A register is not an answer. Licensing is. I believe that even Guernsey is proposing licensing. It seems that all the attention has been given to landlords and reasons to oppose have been generated. So let's have a look at some of these in turn. The first one is that the process is too onerous. Hardly the case. A simple license application. It would be too expensive. It costs nothing. The license is free. A very important point. The notion that the states have insufficient staff. This is untrue. Licensing will allow better, more efficient use of staff. And if it is the case that the government cannot keep the people of Jersey safe, that would be a serious failing of government. So it's said that people will leave the industry. So if they are poor landlords with accommodation that does not meet legal standards, that is not a bad thing. There are examples of this happening, and when homes being brought up to a minimum standard and being put onto the rental market, there is a churn in any industry. So when it comes down to it, some landlords, like the French fishermen, do not want to be regulated. And we can see why. Since taking over the inspections of lodging houses, places we know about, just a couple of years ago, Environmental Health has served 179 notices for failure to meet minimum standards, despite being hampered by COVID restrictions. they have unearthed many examples of landlords ripping off their tenants by overcharging for electricity and water. Some landlords are worried that the inadequacies of their properties and or their practices will be found out. And and that unfortunately or fortunately is exactly the purpose of a license. But good landlords have nothing to fear. The competition from bad landlords will be removed incrementally as they are exposed and brought to task. Hopefully, some will be convinced to become good landlords. Indeed, sir, errors that have been made over pricing of utilities, for example, will be sorted in advance and avoid embarrassment for landlords should we make the step to a licensing scheme. And so what are our commitments to putting children first? The Children's Commissioners has in the Children's Impact Assessment, which I hope all of you have read, it's at the back of the proposition, details why licensing will be good for our children. Why licensing will be good for our children. She references United Nations conventions we as Jersey purport to uphold. So do we and will we do that? And so what are the potential costs to the government of Jersey, in dealing with the concerns raised by the Children's Commissioner about vulnerable children in poor quality housing? What are the cost implications for the government of Jersey to deal with the vulnerable elderly in poor quality private rented accommodation? So I do not see this dichotomy between the young and the old. So I just see it stages of the same failure to provide, and we need to consider it as such. By having a clear expectation that every landlord, be they public or private, will hold a license, we make clear the need to meet the regulations of tenancy law that already exist and were passed by this Assembly, namely the Public Health and Safety Rented Dwelling Jersey Law 2018, which this iteration of the Assembly voted on, I believe. And this is important because it changes the dynamic of the importance of these agreed standards. Tenants can expect every home to have reached the standard when there is a requirement to be licensed to act as a landlord. And we must remember that homes are very expensive to rent in Jersey. So I thought very carefully about the last time we debated these regulations and made changes to address the issues that led to a very narrow defeat at that time. I believe it was just 3 votes. So there are differences here. The license is free. The table of charges is removed. This removes the concerns re the passing the charge on to tenants. The license has a lifespan of 5 years. Initial licenses can be applied for from the 30th of June 21, with regulations enforced by March 2022. Inspections are only necessary for renewal of licenses after this period. The system I propose from the new regulations is simple. It does not incur an extra expense and enables a landlord to gain accreditation on a level playing field. The emphasis is on supply of good housing. It means that landlords are good landlords are recognised, and landlords with homes that are not at decent standard have a clear expectation from government, from this Assembly, that they will be improved. Tenants no longer carry the burden of having to complain. This too often makes the relationship with a landlord more difficult than it should be, and means that the expensive service being paid for becomes less effective. And the simplicity of the system is the key. I could have gone for an extension to the rent safe scheme, making it compulsory, but this does not mean the same as formal licensing. The rent safe scheme does not cover the same scope as a licensing scheme. The only way tenants could know that properties have failed to meet minimum standards or failed to meet legal requirements would be if the names of the landlords who failed to meet standards were published alongside the rent safe scheme. This would be one way to discourage landlords who break the law by failing to meet minimum standards or overcharging on electricity meters, but that is not the most constructive and productive way to do it. So I wasn't going to refer to the scrutiny report because it's the original regulation, but I think it is relevant because everyone has seen it. I see no reference in that to the Jersey Tenants Forum or any input from tenants. There were landlords on the panel, and they could have always asked their own tenants, for example. And some panel members were supportive. And the real crux of it is that there was a suggestion made that future ministers may change things. Of course, that is the case. It's the convention that one assembly does not tie the hands of a successor of assemblies. But that has to come to an assembly vote. So if you look at the proposition, there is a specific part in that proposition, that says, if we want to introduce charges, the minister has to come to the assembly and win the vote. So if the assembly is opposed to it because of that reason, it will oppose those charges and therefore they will not be administered. So what about tenants? The majority of people involved in this. The Jersey Tenants Forum supports the scheme on the grounds of tenant safety and that it protects the human rights of some of the most vulnerable on the island. The scrutiny panel should have produced a risk report on the costs of not protecting tenant safety by not implementing the scheme. And I mentioned again that the cost of not dealing with the concerns raised by the Children's Minister there, and vulnerable children and elderly people in poor quality housing. And this expands not just to the most vulnerable in our society. We all know couples, I know friends of mine who are both working, good jobs, renting, can't afford a deposit. I helped them move out of their home and the damp that was in their old home was extraordinary. And I said, why have you not done anything about this? And all I was told was, well, if we did, we'd just have a problem with the landlord and it wasn't worth it. So we've just moved out and we're having to pay a little bit more. So that is not a way to deal with our housing issues in this island. So there is no income generated. The scheme is not about income generation. The panel has misunderstood the nature of the scheme. Those who rent in the private sector need to be assured that their housing meets the required standard. If you go to a seasonal restaurant, you expect the same standards as one that runs throughout the year. There is no inflationary impact because there are no fees. Members, I would remind members, sir, that any landlord on inspection fails to meet existing minimum standards would be breaking the existing 2018 laws. Their tenants are not living in safe housing accommodation conditions. Surely, as an assembly, we cannot support that. Now, the current inflationary pressures on the private sector are from landlords and agents increasing the cost of rents. The typical increase at the moment on a two-bedroom property is £200 a month. Some rents are going up by 25% or more. A free licensing scheme is not the cause of this. So much of the documentation required and requested by tenants when they take out a tenancy is encapsulated in the 2018 minimum standards. In fact, the Jersey Tenants Forum recommends that tenants ask agents and landlords for the documents pertaining to boiler inspections, etc., and to change the contract if it does not meet the 2018 regulations. The Government of Jersey website already contains this information, as does the Citizens Advice website. Good landlords already meet these standards. There is no extra red tape for those who already meet the legally required standards. So I will finish here and the debate can start. All of us use restaurants, cafes, food outlets, and many more organisations that we expect to be licensed. And we know now, have levels of safety built into this licence. Indeed, sir, I even pay £10 for a licence for my dog. But in Jersey, we have no such system for the major outgoing of most people's incomes and necessity of life, the cost of a home to live in. It is time we make this change, and I make the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputies. The proposition seconded. Very well. Before I open the debate, I have given further consideration to Deputy Southern's point of order relating to declarations of interest. It seems to me that we are not in this debate dealing with any matter relating to a direct or indeed an indirect financial interest, but nonetheless there is an interest in a more general sense, and Standing Order 106, not perhaps the happiest worded standing order in the book, says a member of the states who has or whose spouse or civil partner or cohabitee has an interest in the subject matter of a proposition must, and then at subparagraph C, if it's an interest which is not financial, declare the interest. It does not require a member to disqualify themselves or not to vote, but it does, in my view, mean that members should consider whether they have an interest that they should declare in connection with this debate. For the purposes of transparency, although in the past we have declared interest in chat, if a member is going to declare an interest, they should do so by voice, and alternatively, if in the chat, then we will read the name out so that it can be so that it can go on Hansard and be recorded in those circumstances. You have a point of order before I go any further, Deputy Tadier?
Yeah, I do, sir. So I understand your point of saying that you don't consider it to be a financial interest, but there is an inherent problem here, because a lot of the landlords in the States who are opposing the introduction are saying it's inflationary, even though it will affect landlords' income and therefore push the prices of properties up. So it's difficult. That they clearly see it as having a financial interest on landlords, those who are putting forward that argument. So
thank you, Deputy. My ruling on this is that this proposition of itself does not have a direct financial interest, and therefore that does not fall to cause people any difficulty or disqualification. So I am assuming that members who are declaring an interest but not saying they're a tenant are declaring an interest as a landlord. Senator Moore declares an interest as a landlord. Deputy Martin declares an interest as a tenant. Connétable St Helier declares an interest as a landlord. The Connétable of, I'm unable to read because I'm having various messages flashed up which I can't read behind, so this may take a short while. Deputy Truscott making a declaration as a landlord. The Deputy of St Juan, the same declaration. Deputy Young, declaration as a landlord. Deputy Guida, the same declaration. Senator Mezek indicates he is a tenant. Deputy Tadier indicates, well, an interest through a spouse to be, which is not, I think, covered by standing orders. The Deputy of St Mary, declaration as a landlord. Deputy Pinnell, declaration as a landlord. The Deputy of St Peter, declaration of a landlord as a landlord. Deputy of Grouville, the same declaration. Connétable of St Mary, the same declaration. And the Connétable of Grouville, the same declaration.
Sir, I cannot access the chat. I would declare that my husband is a landlord.
Very well. Thank you, Deputy Gardner.
The same, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
my husband is a landlord. Are you declaring that you or your spouse is a landlord then? Or which? Both. Thank you very much. Very much indeed. Right. Very well. I think with those declarations made, we can open the debate, and the deputy, I beg your pardon, the Connétable St Juan.
So I only put my name down to speak because I wanted to declare an interest, and as members will know, that interest is very pertinent because I would refer myself to the Commissioner of Standards over a matter relating to charging for electricity, again, which is very pertinent to these regulations. So I wanted to make sure that that was on Hansard.
Very well, thank you very much. Very well. That I think deals with declarations of interest. The debate is open. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? If nobody wishes to speak on the proposition, then it will go straight to the vote. So, very well, Deputy Young.
So obviously I was waiting to hear the debate. Obviously it looked likely to end very quickly. So I'll do as what people probably expect me to do. Obviously, I believe that myself as a minister and the proposer of this proposition share absolutely the same objective. The objective of ensuring that we have a system of regulation in place which is effective and help us to ensure that there is a high level of compliance with the minimum standards for rented dwellings. The principal point being is that people who rent properties generally do not get the opportunity to carry out works or remedial works to those properties, and generally speaking have to take them as they are, particularly in such serious matters as electrical installations and heating appliances, which are potential sources of danger if not looked after and maintained and properly installed properly. So, of course, why are we doing this? The law was passed in 2017, but in the previous Council of Ministers, and it was my role to put the law into place through an Appointed Day Act in 2018. And the technical detail of what the minimum standards are was signed at that time. And obviously then the officers went into the implementation of the power in the law for a licensing scheme through regulations to enable us to achieve those objectives. Now, I think in an ideal state's procedure, we wouldn't be having to have a discussion on a member's a backbench member. I don't mean that disrespectfully. The proposer is also a senior member of the scrutiny panel, but effectively from a non-ministerial, we would not be having this debate. We would be having it from a minister. But of course, we all know we've had that before. And look what happened. I'll let you pause there and think that through. Now, when Deputy Ward approached me, obviously we had serious disruption with COVID. We've had so many other priorities to deal with, but obviously it's really essential that we do everything we can, in my view, to fulfill the obligations that we had as an assembly in approving the whole approach to having minimum standards in place before the next elections. At that time, when I saw Deputy Ward's proposition, we discussed it, and although I was advised by the officers that there were some technical problems with the various parts of it, which would mean that we'd have to go back and amend some of the details, really important technicalities to do with the dates and the process of charging and inspections and so on, then I could have done at that stage an amendment. But no, I thought it's far better that we made those corrections in effect in a proposition, and with the team, the environmental health officers, who are the highly experienced people. And I have to tell you that one of the main inspectors is experienced in Glasgow and has absolutely had experience of this, and he's probably spent more years than the rest of us could think about in trying to deal with these difficult issue of housing standards. He believed that the proposals that are still lodged will effectively work to enable implementation. But of course, then I then up until earlier, late last week, when Deputy Ward spoke of the conversation he had with me on Wednesday, and of course he's aware that I was effectively out of the island for the last few weeks, been able to get a break with the amount of work I've got, but nonetheless I sought to deal with that. And of course at that very time on the Wednesday, I was astonished, really astonished, quite taken aback to see the 9-page scrutiny report, which basically seemed, much of it, to re-raise issues that had been raised times before, issues of cost, notwithstanding the issue that, of course, I was proposing no charges. And the points, the depth of points, the length that the scrutiny panel report goes into numerous technicalities on this issue of charges. I think, frankly, I just could not deal with that adequately at distance, being out of the island within a few days. And I would say here, I think members might need to know this, and I'll tell you what the situation is about charging here. Personally, I would never have got into this arrangement of raising charges for this particular regulatory service, but I inherited it. I inherited a situation where the previous Council of Ministers had made a decision to strike £1 million budget out of the environment team to save money, out of the environmental health team. So that team now is still without the budget. And despite notwithstanding the fact that proposals have gone forward through the convoluted system we have for approving funding these days to restore that budget pending the future decisions, because at the moment the service is running a serious budgetary shortfall, and therefore that threatens our work in all sorts of ways. That money has not been restored. And it is a reality that there are very mixed views about whether we should be charging for this service or not. And I have to resolve those properly. Because look, the environmental health team has been critical. We would not have got through this COVID crisis without their work. And their team was reduced down by 50% of people. And we need to build it up. We need to deal so much. We need to deal with nuisance laws, so many things we've learned. We should understand that environmental health is crucial. And therefore, I'm not prepared to take risks for this. I need to make sure I get a robust solution to the points that the scrutiny panel have raised, because it is more than just a minor matter. I have to, as Minister, I have to make sure that we have a properly resourced environmental health team. And so I decided to postpone. Now I accept Deputy Ward's upset, and also I upset that he doesn't have a choice, because standing orders don't allow him. Standing orders don't allow him to postpone anymore. But my proposal, the regulations are lodged, and I've asked the debate and the next opportunity, which will give us time to deal with this properly. And of course, now obviously I'm back in Jersey, and I need to do that to be present today, because otherwise I couldn't have spoken. So I am going to, for the purpose, what do I do today? Well, frankly, I've told Deputy Ward I'm going to support this, because the states have an opportunity today to clear the air. And let's get this principle out in the open about having effective regulation in place for minimum standards. And I will discount the technicalities. I think it would be sort of churlish to vote against it, because some of those details in the points 1 to 5 there, I will be supporting. So sir, I see that I'm being asked for clarification, so I'll stop there. And but I think the states do have an opportunity to clear the decks on this. Let's get this a workable arrangement in place, please, sir. Thank you.
Deputy, so is that the end of your speech? Because Deputy Tadier wants clarification, but only when you finish speaking.
Yes, sir. I'll stop now. I've run out of gas, as it were.
I was going to ask, sir,
what's your point of clarification then, Deputy? Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. I was just going to suggest, I presume the Minister is the main respondent, so he's
Yes.
not limited. Yeah, I mean, maybe he doesn't want to end his speech just in case, but the question really for the Minister was to clarify. He's saying that, I'm glad he's supporting this, obviously, that I put my clarification in before he said that, but does he's saying that if his proposition would come later, once he's had a chance to look at scrutiny's comments, but he's saying that actually he's arguing for charges to be made. So can he clarify that if this doesn't go through today, he will be coming back with a similar scheme, but it may involve a fee for licenses as opposed to what we have today, which doesn't? Is that what he's saying?
So,
are you able to clarify that?
I think I would, yes. I probably do need to clarify, sir. My intention in saying what I said was to indicate that even though I'm going to support, because this is the direction of travel, I'm going to be on listening mode today. And if this is defeated, I shall be listening to the rationale. I said my personal view is that I wouldn't have brought the whole business into charges in this, but I know that there are divided views amongst ministers even about charging, and clearly the scrutiny panel have made it plain that they want that clearer. So I think I should be listening mode, sir, if that helps. I can't give a commitment as to what I would do. I'm going to be listening.
Thank you very much. And as a further point of clarification from the Connétable St. Connétable, what's your point of clarification?
Thank you, sir. Sorry, suffering from serious brain fade on this debate. I wonder if the minister could clarify that if the Deputy Ward's proposition is accepted, he will then be required by the proposition to bring back the regulations. And could he clarify that in doing that, he will consider the recommendations of the scrutiny panel in perhaps rewriting those regulations when he brings them back to the Assembly? Because I'm sort of confused about how this is going to work, if I'm really honest, and I'm sure other members are feeling much the same.
Can you clarify then, Deputy Young, how it's likely to work?
Right, well, this does give one, sir, to answer the clarification, does give one brain ache, as it were. That's what I said. I certainly will go on the state's intention. And I think, but other way, my proposition, the regulations that I have are still lodged. I have to deal with the scrutiny panel and obviously questions, and obviously the scrutiny panel questions are going to have to be answered in the context of what the states decide today. It might be helpful if the proposer gives thought to whether or not they wish to push or pursue all the detailed points that under 1 to 5, which kind of bind the states in how I'd respond. But that is a matter for the proposer, how far they're going that. But I'm going on the basis that the opening line in the preamble says to request to lodge the regulations, so on. Thank you, sir. And I suppose anyway, so yes, and just to clarify, point 1, I think it does need to be a longer period. Originally, it was annual licenses. That doesn't work. I think it does not need to be annual licenses in order to be able to do the regulation effectively. The dates there need to be, I think, a bit longer. The grandfather period needs to be a bit longer to allow those existing properties to be able to have a longer period to take up the grandfathering arrangements. And I think this question about the inspecting the dwelling, there was never an intention that it would be mandatory for an inspector to physically inspect every dwelling. And the issue of charges, I think in hindsight, sir, it would have been better if the original law, the primary law, had said that charges would be agreed by order, because that is the way all regulatory charges are set, in a proper structured manner. It didn't, and therefore what I would have to do is to probably go back under point 3 on there. I'd have to go back and amend the primary law, which will of course take time. So look, I put that out there for information. I still will maintain that I'm going to be supporting this, but I think the proposer does need to think about those detail points. The procedure is not ideal, but the proposer is fully, entitled to proceed today, rather than withdraw it as he'd have to and wait for the debate in July on the regulations that have already lodged. So I think we are where we are. So it's not a good situation, but we should make the best we can of this.
Well, Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. And I'm very pleased with the conclusion that the Environment Minister has reached to vote in favour of this proposition. And I think that the fundamental reason that he will have reached that conclusion is because landlord licensing is the right thing to do. He knows that because of his experience as Environment Minister, working with the Environmental Health Department, going over previous propositions of this nature, which he was mandated to do because of earlier decisions by the States Assembly on introducing minimum standards. And for those who have had to pay close attention to that work and that detail, this is simply a no-brainer, that having a proactive system to protect tenants from landlords who are either not maintaining their properties in the way that they ought to according to the law as it currently is, or who may be totally well-meaning but are making mistakes that with a little bit of help could be pointed in the right direction on, this sort of system is the right thing to do. To apply a proactive system where landlords are required to be licensed before they can rent out a property makes sense. It brings it into line with lots of other areas in Jersey's economy. Restaurants, for example, they're required to be licensed.
Yes, Senator, we've lost you. I'm not sure why that is the case. Unless we can find a way of re-engaging with Senator Mezek for him to continue his speech, I'll have to move on to another speaker. I'm not averse to taking a short break to see if we can clarify the problem. Well, I think as it's gone dead, and we have no reason to know why it's gone dead, and clearly the Senator was in mid-flow, I propose to adjourn for 5 minutes for the purposes of seeing if we can get the Senator back online. Very well.
Yes, yeah. It's very unusual.
We can hear you when we're still live.
Senator, you've joined us, I think?
Yes, I'm back, sir.
Yes, well, would you like to continue with your speech in that case?
Thank you, sir. Can I apologise for that, and thank you and members for your indulgence there. I went and turned my router off and on again, and that's done the trick, as is normally the case. So thank you for that. And I think the gist of the point I was making before my internet malfunction was that a licensing scheme is necessary, and when applied to private rental housing in this way, will bring it into line with other areas in our economy where health and safety is a major concern. And when I say bring it into line, let's be honest, bringing it into line with favourable conditions. We're not asking for an annual licensing scheme and not asking for a fee to be paid for the licence, which is which certainly puts landlords renting out private residential accommodation in a better position than many other people who are running a restaurant, people who are running a stall selling sausage rolls will have more red tape and more fees to abide by than a landlord who's making substantially larger amounts of money renting out many properties to tenants. So it's still favourable conditions, and I'm pleased that the Environment Minister is supporting this. And I think we can't lose sight of the name of these regulations. The name of these regulations has in its title the words health and safety, because that's what this is about. It's about the health and safety of tenants, and any other issue is a peripheral issue there. It's not at the heart of what this is about. This is about making sure that the minimum legal standards we have for housing, rental housing, are real standards and not just theoretical ones, or ones which can only be applied once something has gone disastrously wrong. That's what this is about. And so it's extra frustrating that a debate about things that aren't proposed is what stands the biggest chance of derailing this. These issues about whether fees are brought forward in the future or not is frankly bizarre. And I will say, despite being pleased at the conclusion the Environment Minister's made, I'm still disappointed that he considers this next point to be one worth considering when I don't think it's legitimate. But having to look at fees as a potential thing in the future really is a ridiculous reason to derail this, because any future assembly could decide to insert a clause into the regulations. If a clause is taken out this time round related to fees, any future assembly can choose to put it straight back in. Any future assembly can choose to charge a fee of £1 million a day if it wants. It can choose to raise taxes to 99%. It can choose to provide landlords with £1,000 rebate every time they get licensed, if that's what a future assembly wanted to do. And whether that is in these regulations as a theoretical thing to do in the future is neither here nor there. And to want to delay this so that that clause can be taken out really is, I think, not a good use of time. I think it panders to a lobby that actually is just against everything. And that's the next point I wanted to make, is that I think any move away from what Deputy Ward is proposing is to attempt to compromise with people who are not interested in compromise and simply want to oppose everything. In the last debate we had on the licensing scheme, the issue about the fee and the issue about what inflation that may cause and how horrible that would be for that to be passed on to tenants was a reason that some members gave for voting against it. I didn't agree with them at the time because the fee proposed amounted to about 70p a week. But taking that point that was made then as being sincere and well-meaning, this proposal deals with that by not having it proposed there as a fee as part of this. And so these arguments about inflation, I think, are illegitimate now, which is why it's really disappointing to read the scrutiny panel's comments to the Environment Minister's version of these regulations, but of course they're still relevant here, which is largely parroting what an industry lobby group is saying. They haven't identified any issues to raise at this point with the central purpose of the regulations, which is about health and safety. No comment at all on that, or whether this is an effective means of delivering that. A large part of those comments are simply parroting what the Jersey Landlords Association have said, and appear to be parroting it uncritically, which is, I think, odd, given that a large amount of what they have said in their submissions is nonsense. So I've got the scrutiny comments up in front of me, and the summary of the JLA's submissions starts at the bottom of page 6, and you can go through pretty much every one of these bullet points and contradict it fairly easily. And their first reason for opposing is that this is virtually no different from the previous regulations which weren't adopted by the Assembly. So that is nonsense. This is for a longer licensing period, and it's for a free license. That deals with two of the key criticisms that were made about the last one. It accepts those criticisms and it tries to deal with it, but apparently that's not good enough. The next point is about fees and the inflationary impact. There is no fee in this, so that point is not legitimate. And this talks about red tape, introducing new red tape and the burdens on landlords and letting agents, which will increase letting fees and therefore rents, it says. Sir, that really is taking the mickey, that point, to suggest that the bureaucracy that will require landlords once every 5 years to spend maybe 20 minutes filling out a form and maybe make themselves available for half an hour when an inspector is free to get licensed is somehow a massive inconvenience for them. Really, really, I think, takes the biscuit here. That won't result in extra letting agent fees. That won't result in higher rents. It's a mild inconvenience, and one that pales into insignificance compared to all of the forms, all of the bureaucracy, and all of the inspections that other types of businesses have to abide by. Next point, the next 2 points are about government already having powers to identify rented dwellings and take action. Well, sir, that's manifestly not true. And they refer to the control of work and housing law as being a way of identifying properties. Sir, that shows that they've totally misunderstood what the purpose of these regulations are. It's not about identifying where the rental properties are. It's about identifying where the rental properties are and what quality those properties are. Control of Housing and Work Law does not give us that information about the quality of those homes and whether they're safe or not. So they're just wrong to say that we already have powers to identify. They talk about the power to enforce legislation which already exists. So we have reactive power, not proactive power. That's what the point of these regulations is to address. And they go on to say that a better way forward would be to one that involves tenant empowerment. And the scrutiny report says that that the JLA believes that a register of all property in Jersey would fulfil the aims without introducing inflationary red tape. I've already explained why it's not inflationary. And they go on to say further down in this report that having some sort of option so that tenants can pursue complaints without facing reprisals from their landlord ought to be pursued. And so that simply is laughable, that alternative suggestion is still treated seriously and still on the table. So if a tenant has an ability to make some sort of confidential complaint or whatever, I think the landlord will probably figure out what's gone on when the inspectors show up. They'll figure it out very quickly that their tenant has taken action against them, and that offers no protection whatsoever against reprisals, whether that may be a landlord acting in a way to make a tenant feel uncomfortable or choosing not to renew a tenancy for no good reason and not offer them an extension or renewal. Doesn't prevent that whatsoever. So it's bizarre that there is something that that's still considered. But what's most telling about the scrutiny comments is what they don't include, which is any sort of evaluation of what the costs to society and to the government are of not doing this, of allowing people to continue to live in homes that are unsafe, of the cost of to our health system having to treat people who end up with health problems because they're living in homes that are not watertight, that have got damp up and down the walls, and all the breathing problems that comes along with that, or the education impacts there are from young people living in homes that are not good for their well-being as well. The cost to society by not giving people decent homes to live in is huge, and that's not been explored at all by those who oppose this. So, sir, I commend Deputy Ward for bringing this proposition to the Assembly in this format. He's attempted to find a compromise with those who had disagreements last time round that we may not have shared with them, but may well have been well-meaning in terms of their concerns about inflation and the rest of it. This deals with that. It deals with any concern about the requirements on landlords being too overbearing, by it being too frequent that they have to abide by this, by extending the period of time that the licence lasts for. This deals with those major concerns. What it doesn't do is deal with the illegitimate concerns that have been made by those who I think are quite clearly arguing for no action whatsoever. And so I hope members will see the argument Deputy Ward is making, that action is necessary. The Environment Minister is supporting this because he knows that action is necessary and doing nothing is not an option, and there aren't adequate alternatives to ensure that minimum standards are applied properly in private residential housing. And I hope that those members who voted for this last time will stay on board for that, and those whose concerns will hopefully have been dealt with by the changes proposed in this can vote for it now. And let's get on with it. And I think try to do at least something to improve the housing situation in the island, because there aren't particularly good signs that we're likely to do anything else in the rest of this term of office. So at least let's get this done. So, Sarah, I ask members to support the proposition.
Very much, Senator Connor-Harbison.
So I inadvertently put down I want to speak at this stage, but actually my point of clarification for the moment has satisfied my concerns. So can I take my name off the list and come back later?
Well, yes. You can indicate if that was intended to be a point of clarification, then I will take that off the list, and you can list yourself to speak later on if you wish to do so. Conor St Mary. Conor St Mary. Conor St Mary. No, Chief Minister.
Oh, thank you, sir. It's amazing how queue suddenly disappears. But anyway, so I'll try and keep fairly short on this. Deputy Ward was very clear in his opening speech that as far as he's concerned, this is about having a licensing scheme. And I think that's where, as I understand matters, really that's where a number of members and actually external stakeholders really had some problems with the proposals that were being proposed how many months ago it was now. So, and also I think the Deputy also made the comment that it was free for now, and I think the for now bit also picks up on the comments made in the scrutiny report. Where I think there is agreement, sir, is that we, I think, agree as to what the desired outcome is. In other words, trying to improve the lot of tenants, but also to do it, I would hope, in as less bureaucratic way as possible. And that is why I think, sir, some members, and certainly last time around, the majority members had an issue around the solution. And what I would just like to say, sir, is that we are committed to achieving a solution. There's no question on that. I will say so without putting words into anybody else's mouths, that I certainly had a very, very positive discussion a very few weeks ago, sir, on a possible alternative way forward. And all I will say, sir, on a personal perspective, that I have to say my leaning, having considered this for a period of time, would very much be towards the registration system, registration way of doing things, rather than actually having a licensing system. Because ultimately this is about data, it's about getting the information together into the right place, and then essentially for environmental health being able to use that data to then effectively randomly test and investigate and follow up on poor accommodation. And for me, so the reason I'm attracted to a registration system, I'm putting this out in the position of ministers, for example, the Environment Minister taking soundings, and obviously the Environment Minister doesn't know my view already. It then makes them consistent with things that we should be doing around population controls. We've got extant or existing decisions of the Assembly on registers as well, and therefore this would then be consistent across the board, and hopefully ultimately would make a system feasible that is far less cumbersome, far less bureaucratic, and on that basis less onerous, but achieving the same outcome. I am always slightly alarmed, so when other members guarantee, I think was the word used, that a such and such a system won't result in an increase, for example, in rents or an increase in bureaucracy. I do rather consider, certainly from a hard-won experience, that tends to be a somewhat naive view, that there will always be an increase in cost somewhere down the line. But I think that's a different argument for a different day. This proposition, you've already said, is an in principle. It's to give directions to the minister. But I do say, sir, that in my view, and I will not be supporting this proposition, that it would be better, sir, to actually obviously give the feedback to the minister that the minister is seeking. For me, sir, to reject the proposition, but then allow the minister to take away the feedback and to work with various stakeholders. And that work has started. As I said, sir, I was party to a very positive discussion not so long ago, which I think, sir, will achieve the outcome we're looking for, even though Deputy Ward, for example, may not particularly support the actual solution. But that's, I think, is probably enough for me, sir. I won't be supporting this proposition, but I do think, sir, there is actually a positive way forward, which will give the minister the ability to follow up, sir. If you give them the time to do it, I think we can come back, sir, which is something with the majority of the Assembly can actually support. Thank you, sir.
Chief Minister, do you give way for a point of clarification?
I think there are risks becoming second and third speeches, sir, so no.
Very well. Conatap St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I have already declared my interest as a landlord. The way to deal with housing standards long term is to provide more choice of rental accommodation. This would greatly benefit the tenant, as standards would automatically improve in order to gain a tenant if there was a competitive climate. Hopefully, price hikes would be prevented, and there may be rent stabilisation or even reductions. So the answer is not just more regulation, but the necessity to provide more rental housing, as standards would improve greatly. The important issue here, though, is safety. So a basic minimum standard should exist in order to safeguard tenants who may be intimidated into accepting unacceptable accommodation due to having no alternative. So a simple registry of landlords would be sufficient to ensure that there was some accountability. I will be supporting the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Conatap, does the Conatap St Brelot.
Thank you, sir. My panel, sir, has considered P106 2019 and now P33 2021, and I speak partly to the comments on that in this proposition. We produced this comment paper based on the evidence presented to us, and we are grateful, sir, that the Jersey Landlords Association took the trouble to communicate their concerns, which we consider helpful and constructive. The panel also did approach the Jersey Tenants Forum, albeit we know little about that body in terms of the numbers and type of tenant representative. We had not, sir, at the time of issuing our comment, heard from them. However, States members have been circulated, I believe, on Friday with a critique of the panel's report. It is regrettable, sir, that this Tenants Forum chose not to get in touch before lay evidence they may have before the panel, because scrutiny, as we all know, is evidence-based, and we will consider everything. The costs of licensing is, the cost of licensing is a fundamental matter to not only the profitability of landlords, but also the cost of tenants' rent, because anyone would be naive to think it would not be recouped in some way if there were to be a charge. The present Minister for the Environment is a splendid chap, sir, and a man of his word. There is absolutely no guarantee that any future minister will be of the same mind. The department, sir, has to make ends meet, and to do that, we'll need to recoup the costs of the staff needed so to do. I gather, sir, that the department have no staff to do this work in their present structure, so I'm curious to know whether the Minister plans to train additional staff, how many will be required, and the level of funding necessary to cover the proposals that are before us today. The Minister alluded to most of his staff having been seconded to COVID duties, and I'm pleased that our government has supported that. But a funding stream will need to be identified if we are to proceed as the proposition suggests. We have, sir, a plethora of existing laws and regulations which can achieve the management of rented property condition should we wish. Nobody wants to condone the actions of poor landlords, of which there are doubtless some, sir, and no one condones the actions of poor tenants, of which there are likewise some, sir. I am cognizant of the need to encourage the provision of safe, good, standard rented property in the private sector. Freehold prices are beyond the reach of so many at the moment, so this cannot be overlooked. The landlord-tenant business, if one can refer to it as such, is just like any other business in that it has to stack up financially, and if it doesn't, people will pull out, and that is not what we should be encouraging. Senator Mezek, sir, doesn't like private landlords. He's made that perfectly clear, and we've witnessed his standard riposte to confirm this earlier. Scrutiny cannot comment on philosophical costs as described. The Senator will know it is evidence-based, and we've adhered to that principle. I can't support this proposition, but I am keen to work with the Minister, with any tenant and landlord representatives to arrive at an equitable solution. Thank you, sir.
Firstly, do you give way for a point of clarification from Deputy Higgins?
I've finished my speech, sir.
Very well, the answer is no. Senator Mezek, are you asking to make a point of clarification? I don't think aspersions are in fact being cast. It was an expression perhaps unwelcome, and you might view it as entirely inaccurate, but it was an expression relating to, I think, your political views that had been made. But if you wish to clarify that, if the Connotar is prepared to give way for that clarification, that's possible as well.
Thank you, sir. I thought I heard the Constable say that I just don't like landlords. I'd like him to clarify that if that was what he said or what he meant. And I would ask him to clarify that on the basis that he will never, ever find on record anything I've ever said saying I dislike landlords as a class of people. And one of the reasons I wouldn't do that, sir, is because my father is a landlord and my grandfather is one, and I would take great offence at such a offensive suggestion being made by the Constable. So perhaps he'd like to clarify that.
Would you wish to make any point of clarification on there, Connotar?
I'm happy to respond to that, sir. Can I say that the Senator gives the public the impression that he dislikes private landlords, and I think it is for those listening to interpret that how they wish.
Well, I think that's draws a line under that particular point. Does any other member wish to speak on this debate? No other member wishes to speak?
Sir.
Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I speak as one who did support the full regulations when they came forward from the Minister of the Environment probably over a year ago or whenever it was. And I thought it was a sensible proposition. I thought it was costed. Now, lots of people didn't like what the cost would be. A lot of people accused that if you charge landlords for a licence, etc., it will be passed on to tenants. But I actually knew what I was voting for. So today, I have no idea. I think some of the things in, part 1 to 5 tie the hands of the Environment Minister when he said in his own speech, the Environment Minister, so there's a lot of technical points that were brought up by scrutiny. There's technical points his officers know. And so we've got ourselves into another fine mess. And I just don't know where to go on this one. It is something for the future. If there's a cost, it will be a cost. You heard the Environment Minister, sorry sir, everyone heard the Environment Minister say he thinks his department's £1 million down on staff costs, and this is going to be staff intensive. But if that's right, that's what I voted for last time, and now it's moved and moved and moved. I think it's too much of a shambles, sir, and I would like to invoke Standing Order 84 and move on to the next item. 85, move on to the next item, please.
You'll bear with me for a moment, please. I think that the normal position taken in connection with an application under Standing Order 85 is that at least 10 members would have spoken before I will allow that to be in order. Otherwise, it would be prejudicial to the minority. And accordingly, 10 members have not spoken. I exclude the proposer, of course, in these circumstances. And therefore, I don't think the application is in order at this point. However, it does not need to be done. Application doesn't need to be done with the course of a speech. So, Deputy Martin, if you wish to do so later, you are entitled to raise that standing order, but only after another 2 members have spoken.
Thank you, sir. Totally respect that. But I thought we were in danger of nobody speaking, so I had to speak then, and I'll take your words under guidance. Thank you, sir. I've finished.
Thank you very much indeed. Content absent 1. I was talking about Standing Order 85.
Sorry.
Yes.
Am I able to speak now, sir?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I'm in a similar position to Deputy Martin. I think I should start by saying that the principle proposed by Deputy Ward, I'm in favour of. And similarly, I also, when Deputy Young published his proposal, I could see that was a sensible proposal. But I'm just confused as to what, and hence my clarification. I'm still confused about what the impact of voting for this is going to be. And I'd also like to make a few remarks about the scrutiny report. I have great respect for the Constable St Brard, and I think he has done a report based on the evidence that he received. But I have to express some extreme disappointment that the Tenants Association have refused to engage with the scrutiny panel. Their evidence, in my view, is vital to the production of a balanced report on this proposal. They are, after all, the customers of landlords, and their views are absolutely vital to the production of a scrutiny report that has a balanced view of the marketplace. So, in my mind, until such time as they come forward and express their views, and I have read some of their comments online about, well, it's the scrutiny panel is made up by landlords, we won't get a fair hearing, etc., etc. All I can say is my experience of Constable St Brard is that nothing could be further from the truth. He's one of the fairest men I have ever met. and he will listen very carefully, and as will the scrutiny panel, to their comments, and they will be included in the report in a balanced way. So I would strongly urge them to come forward and contribute to this debate. And I don't think, in my mind, until such time as we have a balanced scrutiny report, I feel very reluctant to vote for this, because until we see both sides of the argument, it's very difficult to know what the scrutiny recommendations will be once they've got that. So I have great difficulty in supporting this. And as a owner of a lodging house where we have regulations, we have licensing schemes, and we have to comply with minimum standards, I'm not entirely convinced I understand what all the fuss is about. Licensing is not that difficult. You just fill out one form a year, send a check off to the states, and you get your license back. And then you will have an inspection. They do it on a risk-based approach, so you will get an inspection probably once every 2 or 3 years. And if you're running a reasonable, reputable establishment, there's nothing to fear from inspections. So all the huffing and puffing we've heard today, I'm confused about. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there, but I think more work definitely needs to be done on the scrutiny report, and that's no reflection on the scrutiny panel. They can only work with the evidence they're presented with. So I repeat my message to the Jersey Tenants Association: for goodness sake, stop sulking, guys. Get out there, go and talk to scrutiny, and let's hear what your evidence is, please. Until we have that, we don't know. It's very difficult for us to understand the whole picture. So at the moment, I'm unclear as to whether I'm going to support this or not, and I'll leave it there, sir.
Very much. Can I turn to Sadier?
What comments we've had from the constable of overcharging for electricity to his private tenants of St. Wands?
No, I'm sorry, Deputy. You can't accuse somebody of overcharging for electricity. It's not parliamentary and it's not appropriate within this assembly. Please withdraw it.
I'm not withdrawing it, sir. It's on the record. It's public record, and the minister's admitted it.
But to describe someone as the constable for overcharging electricity to his tenants is completely unparliamentary in my judgment. Please withdraw it on that basis.
I'll withdraw it, sir, and I'll say, to hear that speech, asking the Tenants Forum basically to get their act together and stop sulking, and from the constable who, in his capacity as a private landlord, along with another member of this assembly, has been found to have overcharged tenants illegally for electricity, I think beggars belief. And what we're seeing here today is there's a very simple proposition in front of us, and it says that we should be introducing a licensing scheme along with the register. And the problem is we've had a lack of action from the very head of this government, Senator Le Fondre, who has told us quite openly today that he doesn't agree ideologically with the licensing scheme. He thinks that a register in itself, a registration scheme where people can be randomly tested and dropped in on, would be better. So let's look at that, shall we? So first of all, it's not because there's a technical difficulty with this proposition, it's because the government is divided on it. We have an environment minister who wants to do it. We have a chief minister who, despite the fact that he's signed up to putting children first, and despite the fact that he's signed up to reducing income inequality, he acts in such a way politically that is completely at odds with those political assertions, because we know that actually the biggest expense for people living in this island is housing. That's whether they're buying their own home or whether they're renting. And for people who rent their own homes, they've seen increases in rents that far exceed any inflation rate. And we've seen stagnation in wages. But why do rents go up? I mean, rents are going up despite the fact that we haven't got a licensing scheme. And we're told that this licensing scheme might push rents up. And let's look at that, shall we? When the deposit scheme was put in, because it was seen as necessary to have an independent guardian of that deposit scheme, it was decided that landlords shouldn't be charged for that scheme, the £21 administration fee, presumably because it would have been passed on to the tenant. So what did the previous government do? They charged the £21 to the tenant anyway. So you know, these fees have been passed on, even though the tenants are the ones putting up the money for the deposit. And if we followed the Chief Minister's logic about only requiring people to register and not actually actively licensing people. Well, and I could ask the same to all of the constables, including the Constable of St. Wands. And sir, I don't want to fall out with the Constable of St. Wands. I fundamentally think that he's a good man, but I think the optics are really important to think about how this comes across to the public. You know, we've got 22 of us in this have to declare an interest directly or indirectly as some kind of landlord, and the public think that this assembly is made up of loads of landlords who are blocking any legislation to make rental properties safe and accountable. And when we come out with comments saying that, you know, tenants should get their act together, well, I'm afraid tenants aren't as well organised necessarily as those with a financial interest in keeping the status quo, because they're out there working all of the hours that have been sent so that they can pay very high rents and still try and look after their families in an increasingly expensive island where many of our young people and older people are actually actively choosing to leave the island, maybe the island they were born in, because it's no longer affordable or a pleasant place for them to be able to bring up their families. That's the context, that's the wider optics that we're talking about here. So if we applied the Chief Minister's logic to dogs, to guns and to driving licenses, we could say you don't need to have a driving license. We could just allow everybody to drive their cars around on the road and just do random tests to see if they could drive, or just make it retrospective so that actually when you have a crash, that's the point at which they find out whether or not you can drive, and you have to do a driving test after you've crashed your car. You know, I was thinking maybe when I go on holiday, I could go into a restaurant and actively seek countries which don't regulate restaurants, or find out some black market food stalls where I can buy a sausage roll where the person hasn't been licensed, because as Senator Mezek reminded us, to sell a sausage roll in Jersey, you need a higher level of red tape than a landlord does. And I'll do that, and I'll take the risk, I think, because even though I might get food poisoning from that sausage roll and not actually know where the sausage roll came from, I think it's worth taking the risk, because otherwise, if we licensed all people who sold sausage rolls, then it might put the price of sausage roll selling up, and it'd be passed on to me, and I might have to pay extra for my sausage rolls. But we live in a world where we license all sorts of things, you know, and we do it because it's fundamental, and there's nothing more fundamental than homes. And I do thank Deputy Ward for actively trying to always talk about homes rather than properties. You know, when people talk about assets and needing to secure a 6% return on their assets, it really makes me sick. And it's not because I dislike landlords. I mean, I've seen the whole spectrum here. I've been a tenant for many years. I've lived at home with my parents. I'm kind of a landlord myself now, in the sense that I have to administer my mother's property, who's been required to sell that out to pay for her care, to rent that out. And I can see how much of a headache it can be, especially when you don't initially have the resources to pay for repairs that need to be done. And you know, so and it's not as simple as pitting landlords against tenants. I've come across in my work people who are tenants in Jersey, but they're landlords elsewhere, and they might own their own properties, but when they come to live in the island, they've seen firsthand what it's like, and they want a system that works for everybody. And if I can, I don't know how long I've got left, sir, but this is clearly a subject that I'm quite passionate about. I'm guessing it's about 5 minutes, and so I'll try and tailor it to that. Is that the problem is, if we only wait to be reactive, well, first of all, that doesn't always happen anyway, as we know. 7 minutes, thank you. And I want to make this personal about a case that I've been dealing with for somebody, not in my actual constituency, but in St. Brelard. It's somebody who lost their home in the case of a fire that happened in December, and there were 6 tenants in this block of flats, qualified tenants, and they were made homeless overnight because of a fire through no fault of their own. And what was quite clear is that there was very little recourse, and the constituent that I've been helping was fortunate enough to have her own insurance, but she's been left out of pocket. She's been had physical and mental stress from this. You wouldn't mind me saying that and talking about her case. There's been very little, if any, duty of care from the agency. The landlord was an absentee landlord who's a company, an impersonal landlord in Guernsey, who up until the point of court action had no dealings with the tenant herself. And the reason I've been asking these questions of the Housing Minister about the residential tenancy law is because it's quite clear that the residential tenancy law, I think when we voted for it back then, it was supposed to look after both tenants and landlords. It gave the Petty Debts Court, the tenancy division of the Petty Debts Court, the ability to, and the very wide jurisdiction to be able to make all sorts of decisions to change tenancies, to do what's fair in all circumstances, and to award damages where necessary, even if the damages haven't been applied for, it says in Article 16. But when these things come to court, again, you've got an inequality of arms. You get landlords are often represented by lawyers. They often send their agents there rather than being there in person. And the poor tenant often doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's not eligible for legal aid, as I understand it. And if they want to take a Mackenzie friend with them, that person doesn't have the right to address the court, even though many of the workings of the law should be quite easy for people to deal with if they've got the wherewithal. Often they don't, sir. And so the system is stacked against them. And then when the court is asked to rule in favour, they say, I'm sorry, we don't have the, we don't feel we've got the ability to make that ruling because we don't think that's what the articles are about. So that's where I was getting at this morning with this. We've got an individual who's been left thousands of pounds in debt because of a fire that she didn't cause, despite the fact that Article 8 of the law says if a property is uninhabitable, you shouldn't be charged for it. But what's the point in not charging somebody for a property if they have to find their own issue? And I've been asking to find out whether an electrical inspection took place on that property, and I've been blocked from the department. So even after the event where we've had an actual fire has taken place, the retrospective request to find out whether an inspection took place has been blocked, even though the person in question is still technically and legally under tenancy. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So it's not a case of being some kind of abstract problem. We have an actual real problem here in Jersey with people too scared to speak up. And I think what Deputy Ward is asking for, which the Minister agrees with, is that, yes, have a register. There's so many good reasons to have a register. It would give us so much information about the market and about what we should be doing and social issues as well. But if we want to put children first, if we want to tackle income inequality, and if we want to make sure that the quality of housing out there, including in the future when it comes to insulation and energy efficiency standards, that can all be comprised by the licensing scheme. And it's much more user friendly to have an inspection that everyone knows about rather than having retrospective applications from people when something goes wrong. You know, you do that with cars. We started it with mopeds. You take your moped in for an inspection. The guy says, or the woman says, yes, you can ride this bike on the road. You pass the test, or no, you can't. You need to do this to it. Come back. And once you've done that, you can ride it. You can, and we're going to do that with cars. Why is housing such a stumbling block in Jersey? You know, this isn't the kind of issue that we should be divided on. We should all be getting back behind the Minister on this, supporting Deputy Ward and allowing the Minister to come back with something meaningful. Last comment, sir, is that I really think it was a mistake that the last government pursued an austerity programme, cut so much from the Environment Department's budget when they do such good work. And it was something I certainly raised on scrutiny and challenged the former minister, who seemed to be signing up to these cuts, because we know that department needs to be better resourced anyway. And as soon as you conflate and link the need for fees to be charged for this to pay for a scheme which is fundamentally so necessary, to make it about the fees, I think was an error. And I think that to a large extent is what has caused some of the concern. But this isn't about fees today. This is a free scheme which will be run, and it's up to the Minister to come back. And it's something we should all be supporting, I think, sir, as conscientious States members.
Thank you, Deputy. Do you give way for a point of clarification from the Deputy St Peter?
No, sir.
Very well. Constable St John.
Sir, I arrived here today with an open mind on this debate, and I still have an open mind. Good governance is the bedrock of our largest industry on the island, and good governance is the bedrock of all good businesses. I agree with the Constable of St Juan that it shouldn't be onerous, and landlords should have nothing to be worried about. Whilst I believe that the vast majority of landlords operate to a good standard, sadly, it's those who don't operate to a good standard that need to be regulated for. I find myself slightly confused in as much as the proposition, page 6, states that there are no financial or manpower implications and any inspections carried out will be part of business as usual. Yet we've heard the Minister speak about the lack of resource. Could I ask the proposer to cover this during his summing up? My colleague from St Mary is absolutely right about the benefits of competition. However, having sufficient stock to improve things is clearly a long way off, much longer off than any additional legislation. Sir, as with all things, prevention is better than cure, and the proposal seems like a way of preventing poor accommodation being on the market. I'll listen very carefully to the summing up. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Constable. Deputy Sutherland.
Thank you, sir. And I'll try and be brief, since some of us here want to go home. First thing to state is there is no charge for this license. Absolutely clear. If we vote for this proposition, there's no charge for the license. And the license lasts for 5 years. Ask yourself, where is the bureaucracy once every 5 years applying for and getting a license? It's nowhere to be found here. This is not a bureaucratic process. It's about as simple as you can get. So people talking about look out for inflation, look out for rents going up, nonsense. If rents go up because the landlord's got to fill in for 20 minutes an application form for a license, then he must be running some weird business model that I'm unaware of. And this proposition is about two things. It's about standards, quality, and it's about safety. And as I think it was the Constable of St. Juan said, there is nothing to fear from licensing. Absolutely nothing to fear. Don't be taken in by people saying, oh, what if? Not the case. And we've got some of the best social housing possibly in the world. And yet in the private sector, we do have properties that you look at and you'd be ashamed to go in. And certainly to see people living with black mold on their walls, as still happens today when I go around, visit people, that has a health implication. One of the questions I've written down here is, we talk a lot about COVID. COVID, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, we couldn't do that because of COVID. And yes, it did get in the way. The fundamental question, how many deaths did we have from a combination of COVID and poor accommodation? We don't know. But we do in the mainland. And the correlation was linked. If you're on low pay, you're in poor housing, that's where your victims were. In many, many cases. And when I go round next time again, knocking on doors, speaking to people, and ask them about their problems, I know what I'm going to get by response. The problems will be low pay and high rents. And if we fail to support this proposition today, I know how it will be seen. Not by me, but I will be attacked for sticking together with those landlords who refuse to do anything about their property. I'll be told, you're all the same, you politicians. I know, because I've been told. And I have to carefully point out the differences or votes where I've managed to separate from the mass. I'll also be told you're all lining your pockets. And if we fail to vote for this proposition today, to a certain extent, one can understand why these voters might be saying such. Again, because some number of landlords have ganged up and tried to wreck this proposition. I'll also be told that I've lost my way. I've lost contact with the people. I don't believe that's true. And then finally, I'll be called a venal bunch, a member of a venal bunch, because I'm a member of the states. Because, like it or not, voters have very little respect for us as politicians. They think we, as politicians, are ganging up not to help the poor, not to help the young, not to help the elderly. And they think we're ineffective. And I want to stop that name calling. I know will happen by voting for the right thing and doing the right thing today. And that means voting for this proposition. And that's what I'll be doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Senator Valwa.
Yes, thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow the last speaker. I'm not going to apologise for my stance with regards to licensing schemes, whether there is a charge or there isn't a charge. Sir, quite simply, I believe that this is the appropriate thing to do, and the reason why I say that, and I was encouraged to speak because of the Chief Minister's speech, where he talked about naivety. So I would push back and actually question the issue of what we call inflation strategies and the requirements of this island, expecting a chief minister to produce a population policy and to have some idea in terms of supply and demand that's required in the island. But not only that, people expecting to have a safe and healthy environment to live in, whether that be social housing or private housing. That's extremely important. So why is it important, and why is it important to me? I've never stated this in the Assembly before, but one of the very reasons why I came into the Assembly, my family have historically lived in social housing. My brother passed away at the age of 4 months old from bronchopneumonia, partly due to housing conditions, mould, and problems with the mould on the walls and the rooms and the housing that they lived in. At the time, many years ago, it was social housing. But there was an argument about whether that was the case or not. And yet a couple of years after he passed away, they condemned the building, and it now stands as the National Archive for Jersey Archive. So, sir, that's why it's important to me, and that's why I recognise it's important for everyone, because we don't have the capacity in our social housing building programme to accommodate everybody that requires rental accommodation. And nor does everybody that lives in private rental accommodation want to live in social housing accommodation. And so, therefore, when we require certain decent standards of our social housing, we should also require decent housing standards of our private housing sector, especially when over £10 million of funding from the taxpayer is spent on rents to that private housing sector, to those landlords who should be held to account for ensuring that their properties are up to standard. So the data that we receive is important for population, but it's also important for our properties. But I would argue back again the point that the Chief Minister made about the increase in prices. £50 a year for a landlord, sir. Sorry, you only have to breathe in Jersey for the prices of housing to go up. because we are not controlling and supporting supply and demand within our economy. And also we only have limited land mass to do so. One thing that I've realised, and one thing that I'm hearing from many members, is that they don't want to do this, but they don't have a solution on the best way to do this, or any ideas about the way forward. And so I question whether there has been a cost benefit analysis, and the previous speaker mentioned the health implications with regards to licensing schemes not being in place, and the problems that come with that in terms of whether that's mold or a variety of other hazardous issues that are found within properties, housing properties across the island. So is there a cost benefit analysis that has been done? You know, £50 a year, if there was a charge, and I understand this proposition doesn't have a charge. But then, of course, the argument could be made, well, if this proposition was to be passed, then there may be a possibility in the future for a charging mechanism to come in. But of course, that's the same for any States Department, and there is an ability for the Parliament to or not to agree to that specific recommendation. So I would ask that that cost benefit analysis is carried out and recognised in the costing model for our Jersey Care model, the requirements around asthmatic clinics and support for our asthma sufferers and actually respiratory sufferers in the island, and particularly identifying through the data analysis that we have around our licensing scheme, should we ever get it up and running, would actually support us in doing this type of work. So I'm fully supportive of this proposition. I was fully supportive of the last proposition, and I would like to see a licensing scheme come in. And if that's not clear enough for the ministers, I'm sure it's clear enough for the Minister of Environment who supports this. But I hope that many members have heard my messaging and my point of view today and will consider supporting Deputy Ward's proposition.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. And I've gone back to my actual speech back in the previous debate, where I personally didn't support the proposition. And I didn't support that proposition from various reasons. Saying this, I do believe we have good standard for accommodation. And I said last time, and I'm saying now, we need to have property register. Now, we have several debates how we make sure that we know who are our landlords. And it's not just the landlords for the lodging houses or for private accommodation, also for the landlords that rent in a room in their house, which wasn't included in the previous proposition. I also believe people speak about the costs, and even the registration will be free. It will be a cost, and it's fine because we do need to support the good level of accommodation. At the same time, need to be clear what does it mean good level of accommodation. It's, for example, levels on 3 steps that nobody wants, not tenant and not a landlord, which will cost a couple £100 should be required to get the license. Saying this, I'm looking at the proposition in front of us. We don't have a system to inspect the properties. We do have a law, but we don't have a system. I do like the proposition that we have a license for 5 years. And the license can be given for free. And I'm not sure if we need to keep it absolutely free going forward, because if the landlord required to make adjustments and repairs, and the inspector would need to go 10 times to make sure that it happened, maybe after the second or third visit, the landlord needs to be charged if he cannot put in place everything from the first time. But there's lots of questions are there in the air how it will work. Only thing I do know, we do need to have a system to manage, that we know what's happening on our property market. Now, I'm looking to the proposition, and the proposition asking to request the Minister of Environment to lodge the draft public health and safety. It's to request the Minister. And the only reason that we debate this today, because Minister didn't lodge it for long time. I mean, we didn't debate. It has been lodged, but it was deferred. And if we would not debate this proposition, and if Minister would withdraw his proposition next time, we will again have nothing to debate. So for me, I would like to make sure that we will continue to look into this. We will continue to debate. We will have a proper scrutiny again process with the Tenants Association coming in. And this is where I'm thinking today, and opposite for the previous one, I would support the proposition.
Very much, Deputy. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir. Now's that moment when I've tried so hard to write clearly today, sir, so I can read my own notes. And again, I apologise to my teacher in primary school who tried to teach me to write correctly publicly, if I may take this arena, so I didn't get there, and we'll have another go. So I thank everybody for their contributions to the debate. And I want to be clear about a few things before I start. The reason to bring this proposition, and I actually do feel it's really clear, and I really hope I can convince Deputy Martin. I know we don't always see eye to eye, but I really hope I can convince her that it is really clear. This is asking the Minister to bring back the draft Public Health and Safety Rented Dwellings, which already exist, already drafted, nothing else has to happen with them, with the 5 amendments that I have added. In voting for that in this assembly, it is a clear message to the Minister that you will bring these back and they will be successful if they are successful today. That is the concern of the Minister, and I fully understand the concern of the Minister that we bring something and he'll lose it again. But if we can get this passed today with the amendments, and I will go through the detail in that, that's what is being brought back. So first things first. So that addresses slightly Deputy Young's concerns. And I understand the concerns about his department, but I think it was a bit slightly confusing what he was saying, but I think he was also saying there that COVID has had an effect on his department and that he's lost a number of staff for COVID. But so COVID is not going to go on forever. We have to be hopeful of that. A licensing scheme, the first re-registrations will be in a few years' time. By that time, that department will be back on its feet. And just to say to Deputy Guard, I was going to come to you in order if I could, but I'll say it now. There is a system in place. Public Health do inspect. And one of the things that this does, and I'm absolutely certain, is it enables Public Health to really target their inspections. I would go as far to say as I'm not a betting man, but I'll put my best jersey 2 pence on the fact that Public Health, sir, know where the problems are and can target. But so at the moment, it's very difficult to do that. A licensing system enables that. And so I want to mention again something I said in the opening speech, a difference between a license and a register. A licensing scheme is more structured and expectant. And we need to be expectant of landlords that are not reaching standards for the law that we have passed. Otherwise, we are enabling landlords to not reach the standards that we have said in this assembly you must reach. And that is a complete contradiction for us, and it's a failure of duty. And a license of government gives permission for something to happen. This notion of a register, which I believe is what the Chief Minister will be wanting to bring, is a watered down version and will have no teeth. It is a token gesture towards this, and so it's not what is necessary. It won't be any cheaper to administer. In fact, it may be more expensive. it won't be any cheaper to look at, because although it may be, because not really a lot is going to happen. So there is a really important distinction there. Deputy, well, let's go through these one at a time. The Chief Minister. No, sorry, let's go through these one at a time. Forgive me, sir. Senator Mezek, he is correct. He's proactive, and a good point regarding theoretical future changes. So if we are to vote against anything in this assembly because of theoretical future changes, we may as well all just walk away and say, well, let's not bother with the assembly because it might change in the future. So in another iteration of this assembly could put tax up to who knows what, could cut tax entirely, could suggest that we're not going to make any effort on the climate emergency and just go the other way. We know that. That is both the beauty and the failing, one might say, of democracy. Things change. But we cannot sit in this assembly and have this belief that we debate and we come to the conclusions, and then once you've got a majority, that's the assembly has spoken, and then say, oh, but we can't possibly have that in the future if that's what's wanted. And what I would say, sir, is if there is a point at which a minister, any minister, be it Deputy Young or anyone else in the future, believes that there is a need for a charge, and I say this to Deputy Martin, perhaps if she was minister and believed that was a need for a charge, she would need, according to this amendment, to come back to the Assembly with a valid, detailed argument as to why. And if she was to win over the Assembly, then that's the way it goes. That's the way our democracy works. We cannot deny it. So that argument, I think, is very flawed. It's as if I think it's a flawed argument. The Constable of St. Juan, you spoke twice, which completely confused my notes because I made notes on the first thing you'd said, not the second. I would say to the Constable, if you're erring on the side of caution, really think about this. A licensing scheme gives a level playing field to landlords. It says good landlords who will just fly through this system. It is, as so many people have said, filling an application form, you may have half an hour of your time used up once every 5 years. Good landlords, and if they are blocks of flats, for example, such as Andium, one can be inspected and the others can be assumed. There's a very quick way to do it. So good landlords can then say, I have this license, and it does not have the same validity as those landlords who are not reaching standards, and so they will not be lumped together. And I think that's really important for our rental provision on this island, that we make that distinction between those who are licensed and reach a standard and those who have not. So that's vital in terms of public health as well. The other point made by the Constable Mary, I think you said you're supporting it, and I thank you for that. That would be great. In terms of improving standards, so I would say to the Constable, I really think that the license over time, and yes, it's not going to be overnight. We know it's not going to be overnight. None of these things are going to improve overnight. Let's be realistic about it. Even an idealist like me, sir, has to be realistic about this. It's going to take time. But over that time, we will have a gradual realization and acceptance of the need for standards, and housing will improve. And I completely agree with the Constable that it's such an important thing to have those standards. I'm disappointed that the Chief Minister will not support this. I think this is something that really he could support. And I would ask him, please, just forget it's me, forget it's reform. It's okay. Just look at the detail and look at the actual proposition itself, because and I'll tell you what, you can take the credit for it. I'm absolutely fine with that. Okay? But let's just get what's right for people on this island, sir. That's what needs to happen. And Deputy Martin, I do genuinely believe that the proposition is clear, and I'll just mention it again. I'm asking the Minister to bring the regulations that were brought before with these amendments, which address the issues that came up in the last iteration of this debate about the length of the licenses, which will now be 5 years, about the charging, which was voted against, and I understand what the Minister is saying, but perhaps what will happen, as I say, in the long term, is more directed inspections from staff that are already there in public health, which is a more efficient way to do things. And we all talk about efficiency and productivity. This, I think, will be a very productive way to do things. And so I would say to Deputy Martin, I think there are lots of good reasons for you to vote for this again. And again, just forget it's me. The Councillor St John, thank you, because what you did is you asked a question to address, which one made it easy for me to make notes, and second, it showed that you were engaged in this debate in a way which I really hope that people are. So the manpower and implications, I understand what you're saying, but with this scheme, because it is going to be some time before those inspections are needed, and as I've mentioned already, I think we already addressed your point actually, I do believe this is much more targeted. This is not going to be an en masse, every single inspection. We're going to go one road at a time like the census in order to inspect rental accommodation. And over time, the message will get out. The message will be, look, you've got to raise your standards here, because it's actually pretty simple if you get them up there. And the vast majority of places are already doing that. The vast majority of landlords are already dealing with this. And so I really don't think the manpower case that you're talking about, and that's why I've not put as a cost, because they already exist within the department. And so I genuinely believe that members of the department would agree with that. Deputy Simon, you're absolutely right regards simplicity, and there's nothing to fear. It's the opposite. If you're a landlord, this gives you a level playing field. You, as a landlord who have put time into the place that you rent out, the home for a family, you take care, who actually are concerned that it's a good standard because you're taking a decent amount of money off people, you are now not lumped in with those landlords who just do the minimum they possibly can to just get by in order to let their properties out. Sorry, their homes out. I correct myself there. And so that, I think, is such an important point. And it's something that we need to take into this debate. And the question is, what do we have now? Well, what we have now is the need for a tenant to make a complaint, which then has to be dealt with at some time. And I'll ask when we talk about implications for manpower implications, what if all of a sudden tenants did become empowered and 50 or 60 a day were making complaints? We'd be in the same position. And the government would stoke up the staff to do it. So that's living in a fantasy land of what maybes, what ifs and maybes is no way to make policy and regulation. And those people, and I thank Senator Valois for being so open and honest. It's really difficult. It must be such a difficult thing. And partly I don't know what to say. That should not happen. I would say, I firmly believe that if you were to map damp, poor accommodation on this island with incidences of asthma, and incidences of breathing complaints, I think they would just correlate way more than for it to be an accident. And I think so that this licensing scheme can start to address those inadequacies. So I think it's very important. And the Senator was spot on regards to licensing. Registering is not the same. A license is the government saying we expect you to do more because we are going to put children first. We are going to put elderly people first. We are going to put people who live in this accommodation first, and we are going to support them and say, we have these rules. We have rental dwellings regulations that we need to impose, and we want you to abide by them. That is a clear message from this assembly. And whenever you knock on doors in next election, you can say, that's the clear message we're sending. You won't be alone. I think that's very positive. Deputy, and also Senator Valois is quite right about the amount of income support that goes to private landlords. At the moment, we do not know who those landlords are most of the time, and we have very little impact over whether they're reaching a standard. So to some extent, we could be subsidising poor accommodation to the tune of millions of pounds. Now, there are a lot of people in this assembly who have worked in finance and accountancy and so on. That's not an efficient way to run your business. Come on, we all know that, sir. Deputy Gardner, I think, as I've mentioned, I think I've covered most of your points actually. This does target, which is much more efficient, and I know you like efficiency, and I think this would be a much more efficient system, and that system is public health. In terms of once the standard is reached, there is perhaps a leap of faith here. Once a landlord reaches a standard and say, I'm licensed, I don't think that what's going to happen then is they just drop that standard. I think it's, oh, well, this is simple. We know how to keep the standard. The licensing system in the future is not a problem. It's better accommodation. I can hold my head up and I can say, look, we're licensed and it's good accommodation. And I think that's a really important point. This opportunity to say the government is backing you and recognising the standard that you've reached. I think that's a very important thing to do. So what this does today, if we vote for this, is it gives a clear direction to the minister to come back with the regulations as amended. And it says to him, you can have the faith that this assembly has voted for this once and will do so again in a majority. So bring back the regulations. So the only alternative was me to bring the regulations as a backbencher. And good luck to any backbenchers or non-executive members who try to do that on their own. It is extremely difficult to do without the supporting of the law drafters, etc., etc. And I think, to be quite frank, quite disrespectful to the minister. And I don't want to do that. So, sir, finally, I would say this is an opportunity for us to have a system in place which is not inflationary, supports good landlords, supports the provision of a developing quality of homes on this island, is absolutely doable very, very quickly, has a time span. The minister can bring back the regulations as amended by this proposition, and we can move forward and look our constituents in the eye and say, we support you living in decent accommodation, and the government has set a standard and is actually only going to license those who reach that standard. That, sir, is a huge step forward for the island. It values everybody on this island. And, sir, I make the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy. In a moment, the Greffier will add a vote to the chat channel. The link is there, and I open the voting and ask members to vote.
I'm sorry, sir. This is St Saviour's. I'm having great difficulty getting back on. I'm going to vote for this. I'm voting pour.
Voting pour.
Yes, please, sir.
Very well.
Thank you.
Likewise, sir, Councillor St-Brelard, my system seems to have failed and I'm voting contre.
You're voting contre? And if we got, we haven't yet. 2 more people.
Sir, I believe I cast my vote electronically, but it's playing up a little bit. But for the record, so in case it didn't go through, I'm voting contra. Senator Farnham, thank you.
Very well. You got 39 on there. Because I've got 8. I don't know where's that. Is he on there? Okay. Very well. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. In the link, there is 22 votes pour, 17 votes contre. In the chat, I count 4 votes pour and 4 votes contre. Consequently, the proposition has been passed.
So may I say thank you to the Assembly for the debate and say to the Minister that he now has the support of the Assembly to bring this forward. Thank you, sir.
So could I ask for the pour and contre to be read out, please, when you have collated?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Indeed.
So those voting pour in the link, Deputy Lewis, the Connétable of St John, Deputy Labby, Senator Pallett, Deputy Young, Deputy Tadier, Deputy Ward, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Alves, Deputy Southern, the Connétable of St Martin, the Connétable of St Juan, Senator Valois, the Connétable of St Helier, Deputy Lehegara, the Connétable of St Lawrence, the Deputy of St Mary, the Deputy of St John, and Deputy Masson. And in the chat, voting for were Senator Mesic, the Connétable of St Mary, and the Connétable of St Saviour registered a vote pour. Then those voting contre in the link, the Connétable of Grouville, Deputies Guida and Morel, Senator Ferguson, the Deputy of St Peter, Senator Farnham, Deputy Ayer, Deputy Pinnell, Senator Lafondre, Deputy Martin, Deputy Wickenden, the Connétable of St Peter, Deputy Ash, Deputy Truscott, Senator Moore, the Deputy of Trinity and the Deputy of Grouville. And in the chat, voting contre were Senator Lafondre and Senator Gorst and the Connétable of St Brelard.
So, Greffier, am I correct in saying that's 3 votes pour, 3 votes contre in the chat?
Sorry, can I just, how many were the pour, the number of pour? Is it 27?
I'm trying to establish that exactly now.
Thank you.
So we had 22 voting for in the link.
Yes.
Plus a further 2 in the chat and the Connétable of St Saviour who registered a vote.
Yes.
So that would.
So that's 24, that's 25.
25, and then there were 17 who voted contre in the link, and we had 3 contre in the chat, but one of those was a duplicate. So we had 2 additional votes contre.
So 25, 29 is what, sorry, 25, 19.
Yeah.
Is that correct, Greffier? I just don't want there to be any question over the outcome, that's all. It's clear.
As long as you get to 25, sir. You know.
Yes, that's right, because Senator Farnham is in the link.
He's in the link, yes. Very well. Very well, then the next item of public business is the Jersey Sea Cadets provision of a permanent headquarters P30 lodged by the Minister for Home Affairs. The main respondent for the debate is the chair of the Children, Education, Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they are of opinion that an appropriate permanent base of operations should be identified and a funding solution proposed by the Government of Jersey for the use of the Jersey Sea Cadets, and to agree that TS Jersey is not released for development or change of use as part of the Fort Regent development plans until such a permanent base has been identified.
Well, who is acting as rapporteur?
I will, sir.
Very well. Yes.
Sir, today I ask members to take this opportunity to reaffirm this Assembly's support for the Jersey Sea Cadets and the valuable work they do with the island's young people. This proposition was very close to Minister Len Norman's heart, and it is a great sadness that he is no longer with us to present this. Members will recall that in December last year, we debated an amendment to the government plan brought by Deputy Higgins, who sought funds for headquarters for the Sea Cadets. At that time, we were not able to support the Deputy's amendment, but the Minister affirmed his strong support for the Sea Cadets and promised to bring a proposition to the State if significant progress had not been made to find the cadets a permanent home before the end of the year. This proposition was therefore lodged in order to follow through on that promise, and as an expression of our commitment to set right decades of delays and false starts. Before we discuss the specific issue of our headquarters, I would like first to pay tribute to the Sea Cadets and the really excellent work they do. No matter where their background may be, the children and young people who join the Sea Cadets are able to access experiences and develop skills which help them flourish and grow into the person they want to be. They are supported by a team of instructors and supporters who volunteer a considerable amount of their time to organize activities and support cadets in their endeavors. Their service and generosity with their time must be commended. The Sea Cadets emphasize the key values of teamwork, respect, loyalty, self-confidence, commitment, self-discipline, and honesty. Cadets are able to participate in a wide variety of water-based activities as well as attend camps and competition and can work towards earning their Duke of Edinburgh awards and qualifications in boating. The offering is truly diverse and provides opportunity that many of the children and young people involved may otherwise find difficult to access. I have been fortunate to visit the cadets and see firsthand the impressive work that they do, delivering for our children and young people. The history of the journey to find the Jersey Sea Cadets headquarters is extensive, and it is outlined in the report. I do not propose to repeat this in detail now. Suffice to say, it is a poor reflection of the high esteem in which we hold the Sea Cadets and the valuable work they do in our community. As Deputy Higgins put it during the debate on his amendment to the Government Plan 2021, broken promises do not get much worse than those given to the Sea Cadets. I could not put it better myself. Having been asked to vacate their headquarters in 1991, the Sea Cadets have since been promised various offers of funding and support from government to find an appropriate new headquarters, but nevertheless found themselves forced to cease operating last year due to the dilapidated state of their headquarters. There have been several schemes that have come close to providing a solution, but all have been abandoned for some reason or another. This has left the Sea Cadets uncertain of their future and justifiably frustrated. Sir, today members have the ability to break the cycle of broken promises and inaction which has plagued the Sea Cadets for many years. This proposition will ensure that in the rush to develop all the vitally important government projects, we do not lose sight of the need to accommodate the Sea Cadets. Whilst they are currently housed in the former police headquarters at Rouge-Bouillon, due to the terrible state of their Fort Region headquarters, this can only be temporary. I and the department are committed to finding a new site for headquarters for the Sea Cadets. This is being actively pursued by the Justice and Home Affairs Department in collaboration with Jersey Property Holdings and the Minister for Infrastructure. Because of a difficult history, the Sea Cadets fear being let down again and left essentially homeless in their former home at Fort Regent. Sorry, if their former home at Fort Regent is lost and their time at Rouge-Bouillon comes to an end. The late Minister and I were clear that this must not be allowed to happen. By making this commitment, we can give the Sea Cadets our assurance that we will provide them the facilities they need to continue to serve our island's young people long into the future, without any of the doubts or uncertainties they have faced for far too long. I ask members to support the proposition.
Thank you very much. Deputy's proposition seconded.
Yes, sir.
Connétable St. Brelard, did you, sorry, Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. As members know, I'm committed to supporting the various uniform and non-uniform youth bodies in this island because of the contribution they make to our society and to making sure these children grow up to be responsible adults. I would like to pay, trying to think of the term, I'd like to express my thanks to the late Senator who has honoured his commitment about bringing forward something to the states to get funding for the Sea Cadets, and also to the Assistant Minister for bringing it through and arguing the cases that needs to be made. And all I would say to all states members is, don't join the queue of people in the past who made promises and never delivered. This time, let's show our commitment to the youth of this island and to the Sea Cadets and support this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Senator Valwa.
Yes, thank you, sir. So I'm going to raise some questions about why the minister's having to bring this proposition to the Assembly in the first place. We all know ministers sit around the Council of Ministers table and have a in and out discussion about what is in or isn't in the capital programme and what's required of the government plan proceeds. And I have to join the previous speaker in all due respect to Constable of St Clements, who fought candidly and absolutely rightly for the needs not just of the Sea Cadets, but the many other areas of his department during the time. And the reason why I ask this question now is, of course, we've got another proposition coming towards us with regards to other property in the portfolio. In terms of the states of Jersey, we get excuses from the government time and time again about the public estate strategy and the island plan and the population, which never seem to appear in terms of fruition or action in any form whatsoever. So although I fully support the Sea Cadets and I recognise the absolute turmoil they've had to go through over the last goodness knows how many years, I wonder why the proposition wasn't succinctly placed in terms of providing a specific area and a specific place that the minister determined appropriate for the Sea Cadets, so that it was identified in the now published estate strategy and the forward-thinking bridging plan that will ultimately, we all hope, will formulate a island plan that is actually more kind of cross strategy focused in terms of how we want to achieve the right things for our island. So, sir, it's not because I don't support the Sea Cadets that I make this speech. I make this speech because I'm absolutely shocked, to be honest, that we have a minister producing a proposition that they feel is appropriate, that they've had to second a temporary property for the Sea Cadets where they haven't been able to get that agreement around the Council of Ministers table in terms of the government plan or the capital programme, and yet many other ministers have to go through the whole rigmarole and what are called, in quotation marks, star chambers to get money for the relevant needs under legislation, and yet now we have a proposition that's being enabled. And I wonder what the rest of the Council of Ministers are thinking and how this fits with the estate strategy and whether this is the right thing, because when other members come up and decide to put a proposition which quite legitimately might be important for other areas of our society in terms of public estates property, that we might want to put certain property on, whether that's education, whether that's health, then why shouldn't I support it? Because I think it's important. So I appreciate the proposition. I understand why it's being put forward. I recognise the historic nature of this, but sir, I'm a little perplexed. So I'll leave my speech there. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And I speak on similar lines to Senator Valwa. I very much support the aims of the Sea Cadets. and believe certainly they should have a permanent home. What puzzles me is that they appear, in accordance with this proposition, to have unlimited tenure of a particular site at Fort Regent. There is meant to be a Fort Regent development policy being framed. The scrutiny panel await a review and a briefing on that. And further, we know that to enable that review to be completed, all sports associations have been asked to leave the fort. Again, I have every sympathy with the Sea Cadets, but I would ask the Assistant Minister to advise what dialogue has been exchanged with either the Department of Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture, or the Assistant Minister there, as to the possibility of providing a site there in due course, or more particularly, does he have any indication as to when, sorry, let me start again. As drawn, this proposition is open-ended. Surely there must be some idea and agreement between ministers as to how long this is to endure. So would you please enlighten the Assembly in his summing up? Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir. Well, very briefly, sir, it's always challenging to agree to something that could possibly hold up a major and necessary development. And of course, I'm referring to the rejuvenation of Fort Regent, which a number of members are involved heavily in. And I'm pleased to say, sir, it's a project that's gaining momentum. But that's counterbalanced by the fact, sir, that we have avoided this issue for simply far too long. The Sea Cadets have been neglected in terms of finding a new headquarters. I'm going to support this, sir, simply because I fear that if we don't, the situation will just continue to fester, sir, and there will be no real incentive for action. And regrettably, we've got to the stage now where we are going to have to lay down some rules to force the issue. So otherwise, I fear that the Sea Cadets will be not given the priority. The relocation or the production of a new headquarters will not be given the priority it deserves. So being involved on the oversight group of Fort Regent with Deputy Raymond, sir, I suppose the prudent course would not to be to put anything, an obstacle in the way of the development, but given our commitment to the previous promises to the Sea Cadets and our commitment to young people, sir, I would urge members to support this, to act as a catalyst to deliver some action. Thank you.
Very much, Senator. Senator Mezek. Oh, I beg your pardon. Senator Farnham, Senator Valois has asked if you take a point of clarification. Would you give way for a point of clarification?
Well, I had finished there, but I'm happy to take a point of clarification.
Senator Valois.
I just want the Senator to clarify, if he can, please, the fact that if the States Assembly support this particular proposition, he referred to in his speech that it would give more weight to the ability for them to find a location. Was that exactly what he was saying? That's the interpretation I took from his speech.
Yes, sir.
Very well. And Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I don't wish to speak for long on this. Of course, the proposition has my wholehearted support, and I agree with everything that the proposer said in his opening speech on this. I think, and I'm not trying to be overly negative on this, I just want to provide a opportunity for the proposer to perhaps provide a bit more reassurance in his closing speech on this. But I read the conclusion in the report to this, which says that it's clear that the Sea Cadets have been subject to uncertainty and disappointment regarding the future location of their unit over a significant period of time. And that, of course, is absolutely right. And we've been here before, and the report to this proposition highlights certain examples in the past where they've been let down. And I know members will want to have faith that this will be an occasion where they won't be let down. Can I ask the proposer in his summing up if he can explain if there is any more detail at this point that we ought to be aware of, because the terms of this proposition and what's put in the financial and manpower implications doesn't actually say anything really substantive. It seeks us to give our approval for this being something that is done. I don't think he'll struggle to get that approval because it is the right thing to do, but it's not outlining where the long-term solution could be found, what sort of funding we could be looking at for it. And I would feel that if there was more detail on that, then we may have a bit more confidence that this isn't going to be another occasion where the Sea Cadets are left with more uncertainty and disappointment as they have in the past. So I just want to give him an opportunity to address that in his closing speech. But I, of course, will be supporting this and wish him luck.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. It's about time the states did do something, actually. It is 27 years since they were promised permanent facilities. You know, put children first and then we kick them to the bottom of the queue. I don't know whether it's due to the pound signs in the eyes of previous ministers or civil servants or what. I mean, why should they cope? You know, looking after children, why should they cope with leaking roofs and floods when it rains hard? And despite these problems, they are one of the best units in the UK, as evidenced by the fact that they've received so many burgees, you know, basically denoting their performance. They do, in fact, have a quotation for doing up the current building. It's done, the quote has come from people who are actually involved with the unit, so that they are actually getting a, you know, a discounted quote. You know, the State Assembly promised. It is not time to kick the can down the road again. It is time to fulfill the promise that the states gave so long ago. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Lewis.
Thank you, sir. I will be supporting this proposition, sir. The cadets have been promised really good facilities for many, many years. And I've been to a visit for their old premises up at Fort Regent, and it certainly was in a very, very sorry state. So they are housed at the moment in the old police headquarters. We've spent money on doing that up to their specifications, and they seem very happy to be there. We're looking at maybe 2 years, maybe longer. It depends on what's decided with the greater site, but I will support this proposition. I know it was very close to the late Constable of St Clement's Heart, and I will support this in getting new premises. And if they have a large drill hole, I do hope it will be called the Lead Norman Hall. Thank you very much.
Right, indeed, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition?
Yes, please, sir.
So, very well, Deputy Trinity.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come in. I'm not quite clear where we do stand with the deputy. I mean, I would like to add something else to it, and that is that we're not only looking at the Sea Cadets, but we are also looking at the Air Cadets and the Army Cadets. There is the suggestion, it's not firm at the present time, of looking at whether we can put the cadets together in one unit. But the one thing is that we all agree that they need to have a permanent unit which they can all use and use to the ability for all of them. I'm just slightly concerned if we approve it, it's the timescale, money, and where we're going to find them to go. But I have to say, I'm totally in support of what's going on. The thing that does worry me again, and this is purely from a perspective of dealing with Fort Regent, that because the Fort Regent announcement will be made fairly soon with regards to what the intention is to do with Fort Regent, we still have the problem that COVID will still be in Fort Regent, at least until the end of this year. It gets even worse in the sense that that may well follow on into the new year. And again, we have to seek health. What I'm really trying to say is there's a lot of imponderables within everything that we move on this particular suggestion. Whilst I will support it, and I think they certainly do need it, and having read the history of the Sea Cadets since around the 1950s, there is no doubt that they have been promised a lot and received very little. But we've got to look after our youth, and the youth, with, as I said, with regards to the Air Cadets, Sea Cadets and the Army Cadets, I think is an essential point moving forward. As I said, and I will say, perhaps the Deputy will just confirm. I'm just slightly worried is the wording, is it if we don't do anything with 2 years, we've got to do it. I think that there has to be conversations going on with the other two cadet forces. There has to be conversations going on after we make the announcement about Fort Regent. But you can be rest assured that I'll push anything on this sort of nature, because I think totally the island does need it, and they do need these groups because they're such an essential part of the island. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I just want to say that I think this is an important example of states members setting priorities. That's what we are elected to do. I think we've got ourselves saddled in a lot of complex processes, how we go about things, which are very civil servant driven. That's not a criticism, but I think there are times, and this is one, where we have to state our political priorities. And there's absolutely no question this is a really important commitment that we have to deliver. And I should be supporting this, and strongly, wholeheartedly so. Thank you.
Very much, deputies. Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Guida to respond.
So I'd like to start with a letter from the Fort Regent Development Committee on the 3rd of February 1971, where they say, "It was the intention of the committee that the headquarters should be available to the Jersey unit of the Sea Cadets Corps for so long as the unit was able to maintain the interest of the youth of the island." That's 71. The corps were actually established in 1949, again with the help of the committee, the Defense Committee at the time, and the help was the provision of that annex in Fort Regent. Now, with this, we shouldn't really be having to ask the Assembly again for its support, but as you all know, the last 30 years haven't been very, very good to the Sea Cadets. And recently, of course, there was our goal to redevelop Fort Regent, and the fact that the accommodation in Fort Regent was really not adequate for what they did with it. I mean, it was literally raining inside. It was unsafe and unsalubrious. Now, this actually happened for a very, very simple and straightforward reason. We asked them to move from Fort Regent because we needed Fort Regent and because it was dangerous for them to stay there. And they were really worried about moving into temporary accommodations that they would lose 1 or 2 years later, and then they would find themselves without anything. And again, their past experience with the states didn't give them much optimism on what would happen next. So quite basically, the minister, Len Norman, just told them, do not worry about this. We're putting you in the police station. We're going to make it completely adequate for your needs for the time being. And I will ask the Assembly to guarantee you accommodation when that is over. And basically, this is the fulfillment. This is basically what we needed to tell them to ensure that they would be happy moving. They were happy moving. Infrastructure did a fantastic job in providing them a very, very useful accommodation in the police station. That probably, among other things, led to an increase in their number of more than 45%. So there are now more than 100 Sea Cadets in Jersey, which is extraordinary, which is really, really good. And as Senator Ferguson put it, they keep winning badges, left, right, and center. They are very, very good compared to the rest of the UK. We are close to a solution because we have to, and I hope to have the support of the whole Assembly to make sure that this is one of our priorities. But yes, we are close to a solution which will be satisfactory to them, and we are working with all the other forces, the other corps, to make sure that it's something that can be useful to all of them. So with this, I commend the proposition to the Assembly.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I ask the referee to place a vote in the link. And I open the voting and ask members to vote.
Yeah.
Sorry. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the referee to close the voting.
Okay, can I just confirm that I voted in my excitement? I may have left the meeting, but I think I'm back in.
Right. Well, we won't know, and if you think you voted on the link, we won't know until the voting's closed, I'm afraid. But presumably you'd like to vote for? So you voted very well. The proposition has been adopted. 38 votes pour, 1 vote contre, 1 abstention in the link, and I note further 5 votes pour, or no, 4 votes pour in the chat.
We have the 1 and the 1, please, sir.
The member voting contre was Deputy Doublé, and the member abstaining was Senator Valois.
Very well. We are.
May I propose the adjournment, sir?
Yes, I was about to say we're almost by spooky coincidence right at the adjournment time. The adjournment is proposed, and therefore the Assembly stands adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.